The universe operates on principles we understand: physics, chemistry, the fundamental laws of cause and effect. Warp fields fold space according to precise mathematical equations. Transporters convert matter to energy and back again following quantum rules established centuries ago. But what happens when something defies every sensor, every theory, every rational explanation? When two beings from realities that should not exist suddenly appear in a blaze of impossible energy, the question isn't just who they are, it's whether the universe itself can contain them. The USS Enterprise cruised through Federation space on what should have been a routine survey mission. Captain Jean-Luc Picard sat in his command chair, reviewing diplomatic reports while Commander Riker discussed personnel assignments with Lieutenant Worf. On the bridge, the steady hum of consoles and the soft beeping of sensors created the familiar rhythm of deep space exploration. Everything was perfectly, predictably normal. Then reality shattered. "Captain," Lieutenant Commander Data's voice cut through the bridge calm with uncharacteristic urgency. "I am detecting a subspace anomaly forming directly ahead. The energy readings are—" He paused, golden eyes flickering across his console. "Impossible." Picard rose from his chair, tugging his uniform straight. On screen, the view screen flickered, and space itself seemed to tear open. Not like a wormhole or temporal rift, this was something else entirely. A jagged wound in the fabric of reality, bleeding colors that shouldn't exist, radiating energy signatures that made the ship's sensors scream in protest. Picard had seen Q's manipulations, faced temporal anomalies, even witnessed the formation of a stable wormhole at Deep Space Nine. This was different. This was wrong. "Shields up," Riker commanded, moving to stand beside Picard. "Red alert." The klaxon blared. The bridge lighting shifted to crimson. Worf's fingers flew across tactical, bringing the Enterprise's defensive systems online. Shield frequency rotating. Weapons standing by. "Captain, the anomaly is expanding," Data reported. "At current rate of growth, it will encompass our position in 47 seconds. Reverse course, full impulse," Picard began. The rift exploded outward. A wave of energy struck the Enterprise like a physical blow. The ship lurched violently. Picard grabbed his armrest as crew members stumbled. Consoles sparked. The lights flickered. Through it all, Data remained perfectly still at ops, his android reflexes compensating instantly for the turbulence. "Shields holding at 63%, Worf announced. "Hull integrity intact. The anomaly is collapsing," Data said. However, sensors detect two objects were expelled during the energy discharge. They are now aboard the Enterprise. A chill ran down Picard's spine. Location: Deck 7, Section 12, and Deck 10, Section 4. Data's head tilted slightly. "Captain, the objects are not objects. They are life forms. One registers as synthetic, the other as organic, but unlike any biology in our database." Picard exchanged glances with Riker. His first officer's expression mirrored his own concern. Cautious, ready, but not hostile. This was what Starfleet trained them for, the unknown. "Security teams to both locations," Picard ordered. "Medical teams on standby. Data, you're with me. Number 1, you have the bridge." "Aye, sir." Riker settled into the command chair, already coordinating response protocols. Picard strode toward the turbolift, Data falling into step beside him. As the doors closed, Picard allowed himself a moment of reflection. In his years commanding the Enterprise, he'd encountered artificial intelligence, android rights, even Q's omnipotence. But two beings from outside their reality, arriving simultaneously through a subspace tear? That was new territory. "Data," Picard said quietly as the turbolift descended, "your analysis?" The synthetic being's energy signature resembles trilithium resin in its quantum instability, yet it contains properties similar to the omega particle's subspace disruption potential. The organic being defies conventional biology. Its cellular structure appears to be in constant flux at the molecular level. Data paused. "Captain, I do not believe these beings originated from our universe." "Then where did they come from?" "Unknown. However, the subspace rift exhibited properties consistent with dimensional barriers breaking down. If other realities exist parallel to our own, a theory long debated but never proven, This may be our first contact with them. The turbolift doors opened onto Deck 7. A security team, led by Lieutenant Worf, stood in defensive formation outside the doors to a cargo bay. Phaser rifles raised, they maintained professional discipline, but Picard could see the tension in their postures. Worf approached immediately. "Captain, the synthetic being is inside. It has not attempted to leave or communicate. It appears to be observing. Stand down weapons," Picard commanded. "But maintain positions. I'll make first contact." "Captain," Worf began, his Klingon instincts bristling at the risk. "That's an order, Lieutenant." Picard's voice was firm, but not unkind. "If these beings meant us harm, I suspect we'd already know." He stepped forward, Worf and Data flanking him. The cargo bay doors opened with a soft hiss. Standing in the center of the bay, surrounded by containers of medical supplies and scientific equipment, was a being unlike anything Picard had ever seen. Humanoid in shape, certainly, roughly 2 meters tall, powerfully built, with synthetic skin that gleamed with an almost pearl-like quality. The being's face was striking, red skin across the forehead and upper face, transitioning to something that looked almost like vibranium or dense polymer. Its eyes glowed with a soft yellow light. A golden gem was embedded in its forehead, pulsing with faint energy. The being turned its head slowly, those luminous eyes fixing on Picard. There was no hostility in its gaze. Only calm assessment, profound intelligence, and something else, curiosity, perhaps, or uncertainty. "I am Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Federation Starship Enterprise." Picard kept his voice steady, his hands visible and unthreatening. "You are aboard our vessel. We mean you no harm." The synthetic being studied him for a long moment. When it spoke, its voice was measured, almost gentle, with a quality that somehow suggested both deep thoughtfulness and alien precision. "I am Vision." A pause. "I do not know where I am. The last thing I remember was attempting to contain a temporal anomaly in Wakanda. Then this. Your ship. Your reality." Vision's glowing eyes dimmed slightly. "I am not supposed to be here. Neither are we supposed to have visitors from other realities," Picard replied, taking a cautious step forward. "But here we are. Perhaps we can help each other understand what happened." Before Vision could respond, Data's comm badge chirped. "Bridge to Captain Picard." Riker's voice carried an edge of tension. "Captain, the second being has just phased through 3 decks. It's heading toward the bridge." Picard's eyes widened. "On my way. Data, stay with our guest." As Picard ran toward the turbolift, he caught one last glimpse of Vision. Standing perfectly still, processing this new reality with the same calm intensity one might expect from Data himself. 2 synthetic beings, meeting across universes. Under other circumstances, Picard would have found that fascinating. Right now, he had a shape-shifting telepathic entity heading for his bridge, and he had no idea what it wanted. The doors closed. The Enterprise hummed around him. And somewhere in the ship's corridors, reality itself was still trying to make sense of 2 impossible visitors. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Trek universe, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. Live long and prosper. The turbolift accelerated. Picard straightened his uniform and prepared himself for whatever came next. First contact with new species was Starfleet's mandate. First contact with beings from entirely different universes? That would require every bit of diplomatic skill he possessed. The turbolift seemed to take forever. Picard's mind raced through first contact protocols, but none of them covered telepathic shapeshifters from alternate realities phasing through solid matter. When the doors finally opened onto the bridge, he stepped out into controlled chaos. Counselor Deanna Troi sat in her chair, hands pressed to her temples, her face pale and strained. Riker stood beside her, one hand on her shoulder, concern etched across his features. At Tactical, Worf had his phaser rifle trained on empty air near the science station, tracking something Picard couldn't see. "Captain," Riker said, relief evident in his voice. He's right there." Picard followed Riker's gesture. For a moment, he saw nothing. Then the air shimmered, and a figure materialized. The being was tall, taller even than Worf, with green skin and a physique that suggested immense strength. It wore what appeared to be a dark uniform with a red X cross across the chest and a flowing cape. But it was the face that arrested Picard's attention. Distinctly humanoid yet utterly alien, with a prominent brow, high cheekbones, and eyes that held depths of ancient sadness. This was a being who had seen civilizations rise and fall, who carried loss like a physical weight. "Please," the being said, raising both hands in a gesture of peace. Its voice was deep, resonant, tinged with an accent Picard couldn't place. "I mean no harm. I apologize for the intrusion. Your ship's layout confused me. I was trying to find whoever was in command." "Well, you found him." Picard stepped forward, keeping his posture open despite the tension crackling through his bridge crew. "I'm Captain Jean-Luc Picard. This is my first officer, Commander William Riker. And you are?" "John Johns." The being's expression shifted to something like relief. I was a peacekeeper. A protector. On my world, they called me the Martian Manhunter." "Martian?" Picard's eyebrows rose. "You're from Mars." "Not your Mars, Captain." John's gaze swept the bridge, taking in the technology, the crew, the unfamiliar design of everything. "I come from a different reality entirely, I believe. Where I'm from, Mars was home to a thriving civilization. Until..." His voice caught. "Until it wasn't." Picard recognized that tone. Grief. Survivor's guilt. He'd heard it in the voices of refugees, lone survivors of massacred colonies, sole escapees from Borg cubes. Whatever had happened to John S. Mars, it haunted him still. "Counselor Troy," Picard said gently. "Are you all right?" Troy lowered her hands slowly, her dark eyes fixed on John with a mixture of awe and overwhelm. "Captain, I've never felt anything like this. His mind, it's vast, ancient, and he's telepathic. Powerfully so. When he arrived, I felt him trying to make sense of billions of thoughts across Federation space. It was like standing in the middle of a psychic storm." John's expression filled with remorse. "I apologize, Counselor. I didn't realize there would be others sensitive to telepathy. In my universe, telepaths are rare. Here, I can sense minds everywhere. Vulcans, betazoids, dozens of species I've never encountered. I'm still learning to filter the input." "You can sense Vulcans?" Picard asked. "Across space. Their minds are disciplined, ordered, like perfectly constructed buildings. I can sense them throughout this sector." John closed his eyes briefly. "One is on this ship, below us, speaking with the synthetic being. Data." Of course Data would begin dialogue immediately. Picard filed that away for later. "Mr. Worf," Picard said quietly, "lower your weapon." The Klingon's jaw tightened, but he complied, setting the phaser rifle aside though his hand remained close to his sidearm. "Captain," this being phased through 3 decks of solid duranium. "Our shields did not detect him. He could be anywhere on this ship at any moment." "A valid tactical concern," Picard acknowledged. Then, to John, "Can you explain how you came to be here?" John's shoulders sagged slightly, exhaustion visible in every line of his frame. "I was in space, attempting to prevent an invasion fleet from reaching Earth. There was an energy weapon, something that tore through dimensions. I tried to contain it, to redirect it away from populated worlds. Instead, it pulled me through. I felt reality itself bend and break. When I regained consciousness, I was falling through your ship's hull." "Falling through," Riker repeated. "You can alter your molecular density. Among other abilities, yes." John met Riker's gaze steadily. "I understand this must be alarming. A stranger with unknown powers aboard your vessel. But I swear to you, I am not your enemy. I've spent my life protecting the innocent. That doesn't change just because I find myself in a new reality." Picard studied the Martian carefully. He developed an instinct for reading people over decades of command, and every signal he received from John suggested sincerity. The being's body language was open, non-threatening. His tone carried genuine regret for the distress he'd caused. And those eyes, old, tired, lonely eyes, spoke of someone who'd lost too much to casually inflict harm on others. But instinct wasn't enough. Not with the safety of his crew at stake. "Counselor," Picard said, "your professional assessment?" Troy took a breath, centering herself. "He's telling the truth, Captain. I sense no deception, no hostile intent. What I feel from him is..." She paused, searching for words. "Profound loneliness. Displacement. Grief for a lost world. And underneath it all, a deep commitment to protecting others." He's a guardian who's lost everything he was meant to guard. John's expression flickered with something raw and vulnerable before he composed himself. Your empath is perceptive. She usually is. Picard made a decision, the same kind of calculated risk he'd taken when he first trusted Data, when he'd advocated for the Exocomp's sentience, when he'd defended the crystalline entity's right to exist. Mr. Johns, I propose a temporary arrangement. You're clearly stranded far from home, as is the synthetic being we have in our cargo bay. We have resources, scientific expertise, and perhaps the means to help you understand what happened and how to return to your reality. In exchange, I ask for your cooperation. No phasing through secure areas. No unauthorized telepathic scans. Transparency about your abilities. You're offering sanctuary. John's voice held quiet wonder. To a complete stranger. The Federation was built on the principle that infinite diversity deserves infinite respect, Picard replied. We judge beings by their actions, not their origin. Your actions so far have been those of someone seeking help, not causing harm. That's enough for me to extend the benefit of the doubt. Riker shot Picard a look that said they'd be discussing this later, but voiced no objection. Worf's expression suggested he had several objections, but Klingon discipline held his tongue. John bowed his head slightly. I accept your terms, Captain Picard, and I thank you. It has been a very long time since anyone offered me kindness without suspicion. Don't mistake caution for suspicion, Picard said with a slight smile. We're still going to need detailed scans, medical examinations if you're willing, and extensive debriefings about your capabilities and the nature of the anomaly that brought you here. Of course. Bridge to Cargo Bay 7, Picard said, tapping his comm badge. Mr. Data, status report. Data's voice came through crisp and clear. Captain, I have been conversing with the entity that calls itself Vision. He is cooperative and remarkably forthcoming. His origins are fascinating. He is a synthetic being created through a combination of organic tissue, advanced metallurgy, and an energy source he calls the Mind Stone. However, he reports that the stone's energy signature is behaving unpredictably in our universe. Unpredictably how? He attempted to phase through a wall and experienced temporal dislocation. He perceived 3 seconds passing, while external chronometers measured 0.72 seconds. His density manipulation functions, but quantum uncertainty affects the precision. He believes he is adapting to our universe's physical laws, but the process is causing him significant disorientation. Picard frowned. Two beings with reality warping abilities, both struggling to adapt to this universe's physics. That suggested the laws of their home realities were fundamentally different, which raised a troubling question. If the anomaly had pulled beings from multiple universes, what else might come through? Have him brought to conference room 1, Picard ordered. Mr. Johns, if you'll accompany Commander Riker? I believe it's time our two visitors met each other. John nodded. As Riker guided him toward the turbolift, Picard noticed the Martian's gaze linger on Troy. Counselor, John said softly, you feel others' emotions constantly. Every moment of every day. That must be exhausting. Troy managed a wan smile. You get used to it. No, John said quietly. You don't. You just learn to carry the weight. I know. I've carried it for centuries. Then he was gone, following Riker into the turbolift, his cape flowing behind him like a shadow. Troy stared after him, something like recognition dawning in her eyes. Picard understood. She'd finally met someone who truly understood what it meant to feel too much. Captain, Worf rumbled. I recommend security presence at the meeting. Agreed. But observational only, Mr. Worf. These beings came here as victims of circumstance, not invaders. Let's treat them accordingly. As Picard headed for the conference room, his mind was already racing ahead. Two beings from alternate realities. Both powerful, both displaced, both adapting to a universe whose fundamental physics seemed hostile to their very existence. The question wasn't just how they'd arrived. It was what had been powerful enough to tear holes between universes in the first place, and whether it was finished. The conference room 1 viewport framed the stars in perfect stillness, a reminder that despite the chaos of the last hour, the universe continued its ancient rotation with sublime indifference. Picard stood at the head of the long table, hands clasped behind his back, watching as his senior staff assembled. Data arrived first, punctual as always, followed by Geordie Lawforge, his visor scanning the room with habitual thoroughness. Dr. Beverly Crusher entered with a medical tricorder already in hand, her expression equal parts scientific curiosity and clinical concern. Vision stood near the viewport, his cape, actually an integrated part of his synthetic body that he'd manifested, he'd explained to Data, flowing in gentle ripples despite the lack of air currents. The android's fingers were pressed lightly against the transparent aluminum, and Picard realized he was testing its molecular density, learning the new physics that governed his existence here. The doors opened again. John Johns entered, followed by Riker and a notably tense Lieutenant Worf. The Martian's eyes immediately locked onto Vision, and both beings went absolutely still. Picard watched the moment of recognition pass between them. Not of familiarity, they clearly had never met, but of kinship. Two outsiders, meeting in a reality foreign to them both. Vision, John said, his deep voice carrying across the room. That's what you call yourself? It is the name I was given. Vision turned from the viewport, his luminous eyes studying the Martian with careful intensity. You are telepathic. I can sense you attempting to read my thoughts, though my synthetic neural network appears to be opaque to your abilities. John's expression flickered with surprise. You can detect telepathic probes? The Mind Stone grants me certain sensitivities. Vision's hand rose unconsciously to the yellow gem in his forehead. Though here, its function is impaired. I am operating at approximately 85% of my normal capacity. The quantum substrate of this reality differs from my own. Fascinating, Data interjected, moving closer to Vision with undisguised scientific interest. I have been attempting to understand your construction. You are clearly synthetic, yet you incorporate organic elements. Your neural pathways combine digital processing with what appears to be bioelectric synaptic structures. In my entire existence, I have never encountered another being who bridges the artificial and organic as you do. Vision studied Data with equal fascination. You are fully synthetic. No organic components whatsoever. Yet you have achieved sentience, self-awareness, curiosity. How? That, Data replied, is a question I have been attempting to answer for 34 years, 6 months, and 17 days. A ghost of something, amusement, empathy, crossed Vision's features. The question of consciousness. Whether we are truly aware or merely sophisticated simulations of awareness. I know it well. Gentlemen, Picard interrupted gently, gesturing to the conference table. Please sit. We have much to discuss. As everyone settled into their seats, Picard noted the arrangement with interest. Vision and Data sat near each other, already engaging in what appeared to be a technical discussion about positronic matrices versus the Mind Stone's computational substrate. John positioned himself at the far end, his posture carefully controlled, maintaining distance. Counselor Troy sat across from him, her empathic attention clearly focused on the Martian despite the strain it caused her. Let's begin with the fundamentals, Picard said. Mr. Data, you mentioned Vision's energy signature resembles omega particle instability. Explain. Data straightened, slipping seamlessly into briefing mode. The omega particle is a highly unstable molecule that, if detonated, would destroy subspace within a radius of several light years, making warp travel impossible. Vision's Mind Stone emits a quantum signature that exhibits similar subspace disruption potential, though far more controlled. However, the disruption is degrading. I theorize the stone is attempting to operate using laws of physics that do not exist in our universe. Like trying to run Klingon software on Federation hardware, Geordie added, his visor tracking the faint energy emissions from Vision's forehead. The basic principles are there, but the underlying architecture is incompatible. You're adapting, but it's taking time. Vision nodded slowly. An apt analogy. In my universe, the Mind Stone is one of 6 Infinity Stones, artifacts of immense power created during the formation of reality itself. They govern fundamental aspects of existence: space, time, reality, power, soul, and mind. Here, I can sense no trace of such constructs. The universe, simply, doesn't recognize what the stone is trying to do. 6 stones controlling aspects of reality, Dr. Crusher said, her medical curiosity warring with her scientific skepticism. That implies your universe operates on principles we consider more metaphysical than physical. Perhaps. Vision tilted his head in a gesture remarkably similar to Data's own analytical tick. Or perhaps the distinction between metaphysical and physical is itself a matter of perspective. Sufficiently advanced technology and fundamental universal forces may be indistinguishable from what less advanced civilizations call magic. Clarke's third law, Picard murmured. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Though I believe in your case, we're discussing universal constants rather than technology. John had been silent throughout this exchange, but now he spoke, his voice carrying a weight of experience. I understand what Vision describes. On my Mars, we had psychic abilities that defied conventional physics, telepathy, molecular restructuring, density manipulation. When I first came to Earth in my reality, human scientists struggled to explain how I could exist. Eventually, they theorized my abilities worked by manipulating electromagnetic fields and atomic bonds in ways their technology couldn't replicate. But they never truly understood. Some things transcend easy explanation. Yet here you both are, Riker said, leaning forward. Transcending not just explanation but the boundaries of reality itself. The question is, why? What caused the rift that pulled you here? John and Vision exchanged glances. Vision spoke first. I was in Wakanda, a nation in my Earth, attempting to contain a temporal anomaly created by an artifact called the Time Stone, another Infinity Stone. There was an explosion of chronoton energy, a tearing sensation, and then I was aboard your cargo bay, my chronometer indicating I had experienced 0 elapsed time during the transition. I was in space, John continued, attempting to prevent an invasion force from reaching Earth. They deployed a weapon I'd never seen before, something that didn't just destroy matter, but tore holes in dimensional fabric. I tried to contain it using my molecular density control. Instead, the weapon's energy latched onto me and pulled me through. I felt multiple realities cascading past me before I emerged in your ship's lower decks. Picard rose, pacing slowly behind the conference table, mind working through the implications. 2 separate incidents. 2 different realities. Yet you both arrived at precisely the same moment, through the same subspace rift. That suggests something more than coincidence. The rift may have been attracted to compatible energy signatures, Data theorized. Both Vision and John possess abilities related to manipulating fundamental forces, density, molecular structure, dimensional phasing. The rift could have resonated with those signatures and pulled them preferentially. Or something pulled us deliberately, John said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. In my experience, when impossible coincidences occur, there's usually an intelligence behind them. Vision and I both have abilities that make us uniquely dangerous, or uniquely valuable. If someone wanted to acquire such beings, creating a dimensional trap would be an effective method. Worf's hand moved instinctively toward his phaser. You believe this was a deliberate abduction. I believe we should consider all possibilities, Lieutenant. Even if that's true, Crusher interjected, we're left with the immediate medical concern. Vision, you said you're operating at reduced capacity. John, Counselor Troy indicated you experienced psychic overload. I need to examine you both, understand how this universe's physics are affecting your biology, or equivalent thereof. I consent to examination, Vision said immediately. Though I should warn you, my internal structure is complex. The vibranium alloy comprising portions of my body may resist standard scanning technology. Vibranium? Geordi perked up. Never heard of it. A metal found only on my Earth. Nearly indestructible, capable of absorbing and redistributing kinetic energy. My creator used it to stabilize my physical form. Remarkable. Geordi was already making notes on his PhD. I'd love to run some materials analysis, if you're willing. John was slower to respond to Crusher's request. Doctor, I should warn you. My biology is unlike anything you've encountered. I am a shapeshifter. My cells are in constant flux. Any scan you take will only capture a single moment of an ever-changing structure, which makes you all the more fascinating to study. Crusher replied with a warm smile. Don't worry. I've examined changelings before, during my time at Starfleet Medical. I'm familiar with morphogenic matrices. Changelings. John S. interest was immediate. There are shapeshifters in this universe. The founders of the Dominion, Picard explained. Beings who exist in a liquid state naturally, capable of assuming any form. Though from what we've learned, their abilities differ significantly from what you've described. The founders are also deeply xenophobic, Worf added darkly. They rule the Dominion through their genetically engineered soldiers, the Jem'Hadar, and consider all solids inferior. A war with them nearly destroyed the Federation. John S.'s expression grew troubled. On my Mars, we were telepaths and shapeshifters. We used those abilities to foster understanding, to bridge gaps between minds and cultures. The idea of using such gifts for domination, for enforcing superiority. He trailed off, hands clenching on the table. It disgusts me. A sentiment we share, Picard said gently. Which brings us to the question of what happens next. You're both stranded in a universe not your own, with abilities that are adapting, sometimes dangerously, to unfamiliar physical laws. Starfleet's first mandate is peaceful exploration and the protection of sentient life. That includes you. We will devote every resource to understanding what happened and, if possible, returning you to your home realities. Vision's expression, capable of surprising subtlety for a synthetic being, grew pensive. And if return is impossible, then we help you build new lives here. Picard replied without hesitation. The Federation has welcomed refugees from countless worlds. 2 refugees from alternate realities would simply be novel. Captain, Riker said carefully, Starfleet Command will need to be informed. 2 beings with these capabilities, displaced from alternate universes? This is unprecedented. The Federation Science Council will want extensive studies. Security will have concerns about whether we're threats. John finished, his tone resigned but understanding. I've lived that reality before, Commander. Being the stranger who doesn't belong. Being powerful enough that others fear you even when you've done nothing to earn that fear. Troy leaned forward, her voice gentle. You've been the only one before, haven't you? The last of your kind. John S.'s ancient eyes met hers, and something passed between empath and telepath, a recognition of shared loneliness. On my Mars, there were millions of us. Green Martians and white Martians, living in philosophical tension but maintaining peace. Then came the plague, a psychic fire that burned through our telepathic network, consuming minds like wildfire. I watched my entire civilization die screaming in my mind. I have been the last Martian for over 200 years. The conference room fell silent. Even Worf's hardened warrior expression softened slightly. Vision spoke quietly. I understand isolation as well. I was created, not born. Brought into existence during a moment of crisis, given life and immediately thrust into war. I spent my early days questioning whether I was truly alive or merely a weapon that could think. And when I finally found connection, found purpose, his voice faltered almost imperceptibly. I learned that even synthetic beings can lose what they love. Data watched Vision with something approaching wonder. Here was another artificial being who had struggled with the same existential questions, who had found and lost meaning. You speak of loss. Were you destroyed in your reality? Before the rift? I don't know. Vision's hand rose again to the Mind Stone. My last memory is fragmented. Battle. Sacrifice. A sensation of being unmade. Then consciousness aboard this ship. Whether I was destroyed and somehow reconstituted by the rift, or pulled from a moment before my destruction, I cannot say. Temporal mechanics combined with dimensional travel, Data mused. The variables are exponentially complex. Picard studied both visitors carefully. 2 beings of immense power, both carrying deep wounds. One from isolation and genocide, the other from existential uncertainty and possible death. Yet neither exhibited hostility or recklessness. If anything, they showed remarkable restraint and wisdom. Here's what we'll do, Picard decided. Dr. Crusher, coordinate with Commander LaForge on comprehensive scans, both medical and engineering. I want to understand exactly how Vision and John S. abilities interact with our universe's physics. Data, work with them to document their capabilities fully. No secrets, no surprises. If Starfleet is going to accept 2 beings from alternate realities, we need complete transparency. Understood, Captain. Counselor Troy, I want you to work with John on managing his telepathy in Federation space. If he's going to exist among billions of telepathic species, he'll need techniques to filter the noise. Of course. Troy offered John an encouraging smile. Vulcan meditation techniques might help, and I can introduce you to some Betazoid mental disciplines. John, Vision, Picard continued. You have guest quarters assigned on Deck 8. You're free to move about the ship, but I ask that you inform security of your location. Not because we don't trust you, but because we need time to help the crew adjust to your presence. Seeing a 7-foot telepathic Martian phase through a wall could be startling. John managed a slight smile, the first they'd seen. A reasonable request. One more thing. Picard's tone grew serious. The rift that brought you here, it's still unstable. Our sensors detect residual subspace fractures throughout this sector. Until we understand what caused it and whether it poses a threat to Federation space, the Enterprise will remain on high alert. Which means I need both of you to be prepared. If another dimensional breach occurs, your experience with the original event may be invaluable. We'll help however we can, Vision assured him. As the meeting adjourned and crew members began filing out, Picard watched Vision and John gravitate toward each other near the viewport. Two refugees from impossible realities, finding common ground in displacement. Data approached Picard quietly. Sir, if I may observe, this situation bears remarkable similarity to my own origins. I too was alone, uncertain of my nature, seeking to understand my place in the universe. Visions struggle with questions of consciousness and belonging. I find it profoundly relatable, which is why you'll be instrumental in helping him adapt, Picard replied. You've walked the path he's now on. You can guide him. I hope so, Captain. Though there is one significant difference between us. What's that? Data's expression, still limited in range but growing more nuanced over the years, showed something like concern. Vision has known love and lost it. I have not yet achieved that understanding. I wonder if that makes his journey more difficult than mine, or more meaningful. Before Picard could respond, the ship's red alert klaxon blared. Riker's voice cut through the comm system, sharp with urgency. Captain, to the bridge. We've got multiple subspace fractures opening, and something's coming through. Picard and Data sprinted for the bridge, Vision and John close behind. Whatever had torn holes between realities wasn't finished. The real crisis was just beginning. Picard burst onto the bridge, Data and their two visitors a step behind. The view screen displayed a nightmare of spatial geometry, jagged tiers in space-time bleeding ethereal light, reality buckling like stressed metal. Riker stood at the center of organized chaos, coordinating responses with the practiced efficiency of a seasoned officer. Report, Picard commanded, striding to his chair. 7 distinct subspace fractures, Riker said, gesturing to the tactical display. Scattered across a 3-light-year radius, all exhibiting the same energy signature as the original rift. They're growing, Captain. Slowly, but measurably. Worf's fingers flew across the tactical console. Shields at maximum. Weapons ready. No vessels detected emerging from the fractures yet, but sensor readings are unreliable near the anomalies. Yet, Picard repeated grimly. He turned to find Vision already at the science station beside Data, both pairs of eyes. One golden android, one luminous synthetic, scanning the sensor data within human speed. John stood near Troy, his expression distant. I can sense something through the fractures. Minds. Billions of them. But they're wrong. Unified, synchronized. Like a single consciousness spread across countless bodies. Troy's face went pale. Captain, I feel it too. It's cold. Hungry. Calculating. And it's aware of us. Picard's blood went cold. There was only one intelligence in the galaxy that fit that description. The Borg, he said quietly. As if summoned by the word itself, the view screen flickered. Through the largest fracture, a shape began to emerge. Geometric, massive, unmistakable. A Borg cube, its dark hull studded with thousands of alcoves and weapon ports, slid through dimensional barriers like a knife through silk. Red alert. Picard ordered, though the klaxon was already blaring. All hands to battle stations. Hail them. Hailing frequencies open, Worf reported. No response. The cube completed its transition into their reality and immediately oriented toward the Enterprise. Its weapons began charging with the characteristic green glow of Borg cutting beams. Then the voice filled the bridge, dozens of voices speaking as one, mechanical and merciless. We are the Borg. Your biological and technological distinctiveness will be added to our own. Resistance is futile. Vision's head snapped up from the science station. Captain, that vessel's power signature is immense. Its shielding adapts to weapons fire. And it's scanning us, me specifically. It's detected the Mind Stone. They want you, Data said, his tone carrying an edge Picard had rarely heard. The android had been assimilated once, knew intimately the horror of the collective. They have never encountered synthetic life of your sophistication. To them, you represent the pinnacle of technological advancement. John moved to stand beside Vision, his cape settling around him like a warrior's mantle. They want me as well. I can feel them probing my mind, trying to understand how shape-shifting works at the molecular level. They see us as prizes. They see everyone as prizes, Picard said bitterly. He'd been Locutus. He'd felt the collective's insatiable hunger for perfection, the drive to assimilate all life into their grotesque unity. The memory still haunted his dreams. Mr. Worf, rotate shield frequencies. Geordi, maximum power to engines. Prepare for evasive maneuvers. Captain, Riker said urgently, we can't outrun a Borg cube. And if we fight, our weapons will be useless after the first few shots. They'll adapt. I'm aware of our tactical disadvantages. Number 1. Picard's mind raced through options, each one bleaker than the last. They were too far from reinforcements. The cube had them outgunned, outpowered, and possessed adaptive technology that made conventional combat futile. Vision stepped away from the science station. Captain Picard, request permission to engage the Borg directly. Every head on the bridge turned to stare at him. Absolutely not, Picard said firmly. You're a guest on this vessel, not a member of my crew. I won't ask you to fight our battles. You're not asking. I'm volunteering. Vision's luminous eyes met Picard's steadily. In my reality, I fought beings that threatened all life. Ultron, an artificial intelligence bent on human extinction. Thanos, a titan who sought to eliminate half of all living things. I understand existential threats, Captain, and I recognize one when I see it. As do I, John added, moving to stand beside Vision. I've defended my adopted Earth from invasions, from beings of immense power, from threats that would consume worlds. The Borg may be new to me, but tyranny is universal. I won't stand idle while others fight it alone. Picard looked between them. Two beings of extraordinary power, offering themselves as weapons against an enemy that had traumatized him, that had killed thousands of Starfleet officers, that represented everything the Federation stood against. Part of him wanted to accept immediately. Another part recoiled at using refugees as soldiers. Sir, Data said quietly, I believe you should consider their offer. The Borg have never encountered abilities like theirs. Adaptability requires exposure to analyze and counter. Vision and John represent unknown variables. That gives us an advantage we have never possessed before. The Borg cube fired. The cutting beam slammed into the Enterprise's shields with devastating force. The ship lurched violently. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks. The lights flickered, emergency systems struggling to compensate. Shields down to 72%. Worf reported through gritted teeth. Hull breach on Deck 14, Section 9. Emergency containment fields holding. Return fire, Picard commanded. Full spread, quantum torpedoes. The Enterprise's weapons blazed. Torpedoes streaked across space, slamming into the cube's hull with spectacular explosions. For a moment, Picard allowed himself hope. The Borg shields were flickering, taking damage. Then the cube's adaptive algorithms engaged. The next volley of torpedoes detonated harmlessly against shields that had analyzed and compensated for the quantum signatures. The Borg had adapted. They always adapted. Our weapons are ineffective, Worf announced, frustration evident in every syllable. The cube fired again. And again. The Enterprise shuddered under the assault, shields degrading with each impact. Picard gripped his armrest, watching his ship take punishment it couldn't return, facing an enemy that had haunted him since Wolf 359. Captain, Vision said urgently, I can phase through their shields. My density manipulation operates on principles their technology has never encountered. And John's telepathy might disrupt the collective's hive mind communication. Or get you both killed, Picard countered. We're already dead if we do nothing, John replied calmly. Your shields are failing. Your weapons are useless. The Borg will assimilate your crew, add your ship to their collective, and continue tearing holes between realities to find more victims. We can stop them. Let us try. Picard looked at Riker. His first officer's expression was conflicted but resigned. They both knew the truth. Without a dramatic intervention, the Enterprise would fall within minutes. Very well, Picard said, the words tasting like ash. But you follow our tactical protocols. Data, coordinate with them. Geordi, transport them as close to the cube as you can without alerting their sensors. Aye. Captain, Geordi's voice came through the comm, though I should warn you, transporting during combat is risky. The Borg might detect the beam. Then we give them something else to detect. Picard turned to Worf. Lieutenant, fire all weapons. Empty our torpedo bays if you have to. Keep them focused on us. Worf's smile was predatory. With pleasure, sir. Data moved to Vision and John, his positronic brain already calculating attack vectors. The Borg cube's primary power nodes are located here, here, and here, he said, pulling up a schematic on a PADD. Destroying even one would reduce their offensive capabilities significantly. However, you must avoid assimilation at all costs. A single Borg nanoprobe injection will begin the process. Your unique biologies may slow it, but not stop it. Understood, Vision said. He turned to John. Can you read their minds? Understand how they coordinate. John closed his eyes, reaching out with his telepathy toward the cube. His expression twisted with revulsion. It's horrible. Thousands of minds trapped in a single consciousness. They're screaming beneath the surface, buried under the collective's will. But yes, I can sense their coordination patterns. If we disrupt the central nodes, the drones will experience temporary confusion while the collective reasserts control. Then that's our window. Vision's hand rose to the Mind Stone, and energy began to gather around him. Unstable, flickering, struggling against this universe's physics but still formidable. I'll target the power nodes. You disrupt their communications. Vision, Data said quietly. In my time with the Borg, I learned that they view organic and synthetic life differently. They will try to assimilate you intact, preserve your systems for study. Use that. Make them believe you're vulnerable, then strike when they commit resources to capturing you. Vision studied Data with newfound understanding. You speak from experience. I was Lockhutus's opposite number during my assimilation. The Borg attempted to use me to gain access to Starfleet systems. I barely escaped intact. Data's voice carried echoes of trauma even his emotion chip couldn't fully process. Do not underestimate them. They are relentless. I won't. Picard stood, moving to face both volunteers. I need to say this clearly, you don't owe us this. You've been in our universe for less than 2 hours. This isn't your fight. John's ancient eyes held steady. Captain, I have spent 2 centuries alone, protecting a world that wasn't my birth home because protecting others is who I am. Vision and I may be strangers to you, but we're not strangers to duty. This is exactly our fight. Vision nodded. In my universe, there's a saying among Earth's defenders. We fight because no one else can. Right now, we're the only ones who can fight the Borg on their terms. That's reason enough. Picard felt something tighten in his chest. Pride, perhaps, or recognition. These beings, displaced and wounded, still chose to stand against darkness. It was the most Starfleet thing he'd witnessed from non-Starfleet personnel in years. Then go, he said quietly, and come back alive. Both of you. The Enterprise shuddered again as another cutting beam raked across the hull. Alarms blared. Smoke filled the bridge. Shields at 40%, Worf announced. We cannot sustain this much longer. Transporter room 2, Picard ordered. Energize when ready. Vision and John moved toward the turbolift. As the doors closed, Picard caught one last glimpse of them, the synthetic being and the shapeshifter standing side by side, ready to face the galaxy's most terrifying enemy. The turbolift descended. On the bridge, crew members worked with desperate efficiency, trying to keep the Enterprise alive long enough for this insane gambit to work. Troy suddenly gasped, her hands flying to her temples. Captain, something's wrong. I'm sensing more minds. Coming through the fractures. Dozens of them. Hundreds. The view screen shifted. Through 3 different subspace rifts, more shapes emerged. Not Borg cubes this time. Romulan warboats. A dozen of them, decloaking in perfect formation, their disruptors already charging. The Romulans, Riker breathed. They followed the Borg through. And behind the warboats, something else appeared, sleek, predatory vessels Picard didn't recognize. Their hull configuration suggested speed and stealth. Advanced weapons systems lined every surface. Captain, Data said, his voice carrying an edge of concern. I am detecting chronoton signatures from those unknown vessels. They are from a different temporal period. Possibly even a different timeline entirely. Picard stared at the view screen, watching as reality itself vomited forth ships from across dimensions and time. The Borg. The Romulans. Unknown temporal vessels. All converging on his position. All hunting the same prey, Vision and John. All hands. Picard said, his voice cutting through the chaos. Brace for multiple engagements. This is going to get worse before it gets better. If it gets better at all, he thought but didn't say. In the transporter room, Vision and John materialized in a shimmer of energy. Geordi LaForge stood at the controls, his visor tracking their biosigns. You're clear for transport to the Borg cube, Geordi said. But I'm reading massive subspace instabilities. The rifts are affecting transporter coherence. I might not be able to get you back cleanly. Vision and John exchanged glances. Then we'll make our own way back, John said calmly. Good luck, Geordi said. His hands moved across the controls. Energizing. The transporter beam took them, dissolving their forms into streams of energy and hurling them toward the heart of the Borg cube, toward thousands of drones, toward assimilation and death, toward a battle that would determine whether the Enterprise, and perhaps all of Federation space, survived the night. The transporter beam released them into hell. Vision and John materialized inside the Borg cube, their molecules reassembling in a vast chamber that stretched hundreds of meters in every direction. The air, if it could be called air, reeked of ozone and decay. Alcoves lined every surface like cells in a hive, each one containing a drone in various states of regeneration. Some were humanoid, others barely recognizable as having once been living beings. Borg technology had consumed them all, replacing flesh with circuitry, individuality with collective purpose. The drones didn't react immediately. They stood motionless in their alcoves, eyes closed, connected to the vast neural network that bound them into a single consciousness. But Vision could sense the cube's awareness shifting, focusing inward like a massive eye turning to examine an irritant. They know we're here, he said quietly. John's form shimmered, his Martian physiology responding instinctively to threat. His muscles tensed, ready for combat. I can feel them. Thousands of minds, all screaming the same thought. Assimilate. Adapt. Perfect. His voice carried deep revulsion. It's an abomination. The nearest drone's eyes snapped open in perfect synchronization. Green targeting lasers activated, sweeping across Vision and John. Then they moved. Not with individual purpose, but with the coordinated precision of a single organism controlling multiple limbs. Biological organism detected. The collective's voice echoed through the chamber, emanating from every drone simultaneously. Species unknown. Shape-shifting capability detected. Telepathic potential, significant. You will be assimilated. Synthetic organism detected. Another chorus of voices intoned, focusing on Vision. Energy signature unknown. Construction. Hybrid organic synthetic. Technology, unprecedented. You will be assimilated. Your distinctiveness will enhance the collective. 20 drones detached from their alcoves and advanced, tubules extending from their cybernetic arms. Injection ports designed to flood victims with nanoprobes, beginning the horrific transformation into Borg. Vision raised his hand. The Mind Stone flared with golden light, and a beam of pure energy erupted outward. It struck the lead drone square in the chest, and for a moment, the concentrated power seemed to work. The drone staggered, circuits overloading, armor melting. Then the Borg adapted. The next drone's personal shield flared to life, absorbing Vision's energy beam with cold efficiency. The beam scattered harmlessly across adaptive frequencies. The drone continued its advance without pause. Your energy weapon has been analyzed, the collective stated. Adaptation complete. Your attack is futile. Then let's try something they haven't seen, John said. His form blurred and shifted. In an instant, the 7-foot Martian disappeared, replaced by an exact duplicate of a Borg drone. Down to the cybernetic implants, the pale skin, the mechanical precision of movement. The advancing drones hesitated, their collective consciousness momentarily confused by the presence of what appeared to be one of their own. John didn't give them time to compensate. He phased his density to intangibility and surged forward, his insubstantial form passing through 3 drones like a ghost. As he moved through their bodies, his telepathy struck directly into their cybernetic cortical nodes, the implants that connected them to the hive mind. The drones collapsed, convulsing. Their connection to the collective severed violently. But John staggered as he re-solidified, his Martian features returning, his hand pressed to his temple. Their minds. The collective is fighting back. It's trying to assimilate my consciousness through the telepathic link. Vision moved instantly, placing himself between John and the advancing drones. His body's density increased to maximum, making him nearly impervious to physical attack. A drone swung at him with a cybernetic fist augmented by hydraulic force, capable of crushing duranium. The impact rang like a bell, but Vision didn't budge. He grabbed the drone's arm and, with a calculated application of the Mind Stone's remaining power, overloaded its neural processor. The drone went rigid, then collapsed. They adapt to energy weapons, Vision observed, his tactical subroutines analyzing combat data in real time. But they're slower to adapt to direct physical interference and telepathic assault. We exploit that. Agreed. John had recovered, his mental shields reinforced against the collective's psychic intrusion. Where are these power nodes data mentioned? Vision's enhanced vision penetrated the cube's bulkheads, scanning through layers of Borg technology until he located 3 massive energy signatures pulsing deep within the structure. 300 meters in that direction, 200 meters down, and 100 meters to starboard. They're heavily defended. Then we split up. You take the nearest node. I'll phase through the cube's infrastructure and target the others. Splitting up reduces our tactical advantage, Vision countered, even as more drones poured into the chamber from adjacent corridors. Dozens. Hundreds. It also divides their forces. John's eyes began to glow with Martian vision, heat beams capable of melting titanium. I've fought impossible odds before, Vision. Sometimes the best strategy is controlled chaos. Vision processed this. Logic suggested staying together. But John was right. The Borg excelled at focusing overwhelming force against concentrated targets. Dispersing would force the collective to allocate resources across multiple threat vectors. Acceptable, Vision said. We rendezvous at the primary power core after destroying the nodes. Agreed. And Vision. John's expression carried grim determination. Don't let them touch you. Those nanoprobes will spread through your systems faster than you can purge them. Even synthetic beings aren't immune to assimilation. I'm aware. The same applies to you. John nodded once. Then his form blurred again. This time he became something entirely different. A mass of undefined matter, flowing like liquid mercury. He poured through a ventilation grate and disappeared into the cube's infrastructure, phasing through solid matter with the ease of thought. Vision was alone. The drones advanced in perfect lockstep, a wall of cybernetic bodies driven by singular purpose. Behind them, larger constructs emerged. Tactical drones, heavily armored and bristling with cutting tools designed to dismantle ships. The Borg were committing serious resources to his capture. Good. That meant fewer drones focused on the Enterprise. Vision reduced his density to near intangibility and dove through the deck plating, phasing downward through multiple levels. The Borg cube's interior was a 3-dimensional maze of alcoves, conduits, and processing centers. Drones worked everywhere, maintaining the ship's systems with mechanical efficiency. They didn't react to Vision's passage until he re-solidified on the level containing the first power node. The node itself was massive, a cylindrical structure 20 meters tall, pulsing with green energy that fed power throughout this section of the cube. Borg drones clustered around it like antibodies protecting a vital organ. When vision materialized, they reacted instantly. Defensive protocols active, the collective announced through every drone. Priority: protect power distribution systems. Secondary priority: capture synthetic entity intact. Vision's analytical mind processed their formation instantly. They were trying to box him in, force him toward assimilation tubules while minimizing damage to the power node. The Borg wanted both, his capture and their systems preserved. He wouldn't give them either. Vision increased his density to maximum and charged straight at the node. Drones threw themselves into his path, trying to halt his momentum through sheer mass. Vision plowed through them like a battering ram, his vibranium-enhanced structure scattering cybernetic bodies like bowling pins. He reached the power node and drove his fist directly into its core. The Mind Stone flared, not with an external energy beam the Borg could adapt to, but with internal destabilization. Vision channeled the stone's power directly into the node's energy matrix, creating a cascade failure from within. The node shrieked with feedback, its carefully regulated energy output spiking into dangerous overload. Warning, the collective stated, emotionless despite impending catastrophe. Power Node 1 experiencing critical failure. Rerouting energy distribution. Adapting. But they couldn't adapt fast enough. The node exploded in a shower of plasma and shrapnel. The detonation threw Vision backward, his synthetic body absorbing damage that would have killed an organic being instantly. He crashed through 3 bulkheads before managing to phase his density and arrest his momentum. Alarms blared throughout the cube, not audible alarms, but cascading system failures as entire sections lost power. Emergency lighting activated, bathing the corridors in sickly red. The drones continued their pursuit, relentless despite the damage. Vision checked his internal systems. The explosion had cost him. His vibranium structure showed stress fractures. The Mind Stone's energy output had dropped to 73% efficiency. He was adapting to this universe's physics, but the process was draining him faster than he'd calculated. No time for repairs. He had to keep moving. Elsewhere in the cube, John flowed through conduits like water, his morphogenic structure allowing him to navigate spaces no solid being could traverse. He emerged in a vast chamber filled with processing equipment. Borg drones stood motionless in rows, receiving upgrades and modifications from automated systems. This was where the collective refined its captives, turning them from individuals into components. John felt bile rise in his throat. His people had been telepaths, yes, but they'd used that gift to understand each other better, to build bridges between minds while respecting boundaries. The Borg did the opposite. They obliterated boundaries, crushed individuality beneath the weight of imposed unity. He resumed humanoid form, green skin and red eyes marking him clearly as alien. The processing drones activated immediately, their programming prioritizing new biological specimens. Species unknown, they droned. Preliminary analysis suggests telepathic capability and molecular restructuring. Begin assimilation protocols. This being will enhance the collective's capabilities significantly. You will never touch my mind, John said quietly. He reached out with his telepathy, not to read their thoughts. The hive mind was too vast, too overwhelming, but to find the individuals buried beneath. The people who'd been assimilated against their will, their personalities suppressed, but not entirely destroyed. He found them. Hundreds of consciousnesses, screaming silently in their prison of flesh and circuitry. John didn't try to free them. He couldn't, not without destroying the drones entirely. But he could give them a moment. A single instant where they remembered who they'd been. The advancing drones stumbled. Their perfect coordination fractured as buried personalities surged against the collective's control. It lasted only seconds. The hive mind reasserted dominance with brutal efficiency, but it was enough. John surged forward, his Martian strength allowing him to rip through cybernetic bodies with terrifying ease. He wasn't trying to destroy drones. He was clearing a path to the second power node, visible through the chamber's far wall. Borg adaptation algorithms engaged. Force field emitters activated, creating barriers to contain him. But John phased through them, his molecular structure temporarily insubstantial. The collective tried to compensate, generating magnetic fields to disrupt his density shifting. John gritted his teeth against the pain. The fields interfered with his shape-shifting at a fundamental level, but pushed through. He reached the power node and placed both hands against its surface. Instead of destroying it through physical force, John did something the Borg had never encountered. He used his molecular restructuring ability to merge briefly with the node itself, becoming part of its structure. Then, from within, he altered his atomic composition to something unstable. The node began to vibrate. Its energy matrix, designed for perfect efficiency, suddenly had a foreign element introducing chaos at the quantum level. John separated himself and staggered back, his body smoking from the energy feedback. The node's vibration intensified, becoming visible, then audible, then catastrophic. It detonated with even more force than Vision's destruction of the first node. The explosion tore through 3 decks of the Borg cube. John barely managed to phase himself intangible as superheated plasma washed over his position. When he resolidified, his body was covered in burns. His regeneration factor was working, but slowly. This universe's different physics made even his healing less efficient. 2 nodes down, he muttered, forcing himself to move despite the pain. 1 to go. On the bridge of the Enterprise, Picard watched the Borg cube's power readings fluctuate wildly on the tactical display. 2 major explosions inside the cube, data reported. Borg shield strength has decreased by 47%. Offensive capabilities reduced. Vision and John appear to be succeeding. But at what cost? Picard murmured, remembering the burns he'd seen covering John's body through the brief sensor lock they'd managed. Captain, Worf interrupted urgently. The Romulan warbirds are moving into attack formation. They're targeting the subspace rifts. They want to seal the rifts, Riker realized. Trap the Borg here. Trap Vision and John here. Or they want to weaponize them, Troy suggested darkly. The Tal Shiar has been experimenting with dimensional technology for years. This is an opportunity they won't pass up. Picard's jaw tightened. Hail the Romulan flagship. Channel open, Worf reported. A Romulan commander appeared on screen. Sharp features, calculating eyes, the absolute confidence of someone holding tactical advantage. Captain Picard, how fortuitous to find you here. The Tal Shiar has been tracking these dimensional anomalies for some time. We're here to contain the threat. By contain, you mean capture the beings responsible and exploit them for military purposes, Picard said flatly. The commander smiled without warmth. Such cynicism, Captain. We're simply ensuring these dangerous anomalies don't threaten galactic stability. The beings inside that Borg cube are not threats. They're refugees. Refugees with the power to tear holes in reality itself? Forgive me if I find that distinction irrelevant. The commander's expression hardened. Stand down, Picard. This sector is now under Romulan jurisdiction. We'll retrieve your refugees after they've finished destroying themselves fighting the Borg. The transmission cut off. Romulan vessels are charging weapons, Worf reported. They're not targeting us. They're targeting the cube. They're going to destroy it, Picard realized with horror. With Vision and John still inside. Vision and John converged on the 3rd power node from opposite corridors, both showing visible damage from their separate battles. Vision's synthetic skin bore scorch marks, and several of his vibranium-enhanced plates showed stress fractures that glowed faintly with the Mind Stone's destabilized energy. John's green skin was marred with burns that his regeneration struggled to heal, and his movements carried a slight tremor from the energy feedback he'd absorbed. The 3rd power node chamber was different from the others. Larger, more heavily defended, and at its center stood something that made both of them stop. A Borg queen. She stood on an elevated platform, cables and conduits connecting her to the cube's systems like a spider at the center of its web. Her pale face possessed an unsettling beauty, the collective's attempt at creating something that could interface with individuality while maintaining hive perfection. Her eyes fixed on Vision and John with an intelligence far more focused than the distributed consciousness of the drones. Remarkable, she said, her voice a blend of mechanical precision and organic inflection. 2 beings from realities that should not touch ours. The synthetic one carries technology we have never encountered. The organic one possesses biological abilities that defy our assimilation protocols. She smiled, and it was more disturbing than any drone's blank expression. You are both. Perfection waiting to be achieved. We're not joining your collective, Vision stated, his tone flat and absolute. Choice is irrelevant. The Queen gestured with one hand, and the chamber flooded with drones, tactical variants, heavy assault units, and specialized assimilation units designed for difficult targets. You've destroyed 2 of my power nodes. Impressive. But this node is shielded by adaptive force fields and defended by my most advanced drones. You cannot reach it. You cannot destroy it. You can only delay the inevitable. John's telepathy reached out, trying to read the Queen's intentions. What he found made him recoil. She's not just defending the node. She's stalling. The cube is preparing to fire on the Enterprise. Vision's sensors confirmed it immediately. Weapons charging. They'll fire in 47 seconds. Then we have 47 seconds to stop her, John said grimly. The drones attacked as one. Vision increased his density and met them head-on, his fist striking with enough force to crumple reinforced Borg armor. But these were not standard drones. They'd been specifically configured to counter his abilities. Magnetic restraints deployed, trying to lock onto his vibranium structure. Nanoprobe injectors extended on reinforced arms, designed to penetrate even his enhanced defenses. John shifted forms, becoming something massive and powerful. Not quite any single Earth animal, but a combination of their most dangerous attributes. Claws that could rend steel. Hide thick enough to resist cutting beams. Speed that let him move between drones faster than their targeting systems could track. But the Borg adapted. They always adapted. A force field snapped into existence around John, not trying to contain him, but to generate intense heat, exploiting his species' vulnerability to fire. The field ignited the air itself, creating a cage of flame. John screamed, his psychological trauma from Mars's destruction amplifying the physical pain. His concentration shattered, and his shape-shifted form collapsed back to his natural Martian appearance. We have analyzed your fear, the Queen observed clinically. Fire, the weapon that destroyed your civilization. Your weakness is now ours to exploit. Vision saw John trapped, burning, and made an immediate tactical decision. He reduced his density to near intangibility and phased through the attacking drones, passing through their bodies like a ghost. They tried to adjust their weapons, but Vision's density manipulation was more sophisticated than anything they'd encountered. The Mind Stone's quantum properties defied their conventional physics. He reached the force field surrounding John and phased his hand inside, grasping the Martian's shoulder. Then Vision did something he'd never attempted before. He extended his intangibility to another being, using the Mind Stone's reality-warping properties to temporarily alter John's molecular cohesion. It worked. Barely. The strain on Vision's systems was immense, but both of them became insubstantial enough to slip through the force field. They emerged on the other side, and Vision immediately released John, his energy reserves dropping dangerously low. Thank you, John gasped, his burns healing now that he was free from the flames. 29 seconds until the cube fires on the Enterprise, Vision reported. His optical sensors focused on the power node, analyzing its shield configuration. The force field is adaptive, but it's drawing power from the node itself. If we overload the field, it might collapse. How do we overload a field designed to adapt to any energy input? By giving it something it can't classify. Vision's hand went to the Mind Stone. This stone operates on principles that don't exist in this universe. The Borg have been trying to analyze it since we arrived, but their algorithms can't fully comprehend what it is. If I channel the stone's energy directly into the force field, the adaptation protocols might fail. Might. I calculate a 63% probability of success. John managed a pained smile. I've faced worse odds. The Borg Queen had been observing their exchange with cold interest. Your tactical analysis is sound, she said, but flawed. You assume you have 29 seconds. You don't. The cube fired early. On the Enterprise bridge, alarms shrieked as the cutting beam lanced toward them. Evasive maneuvers. Picard commanded. The Enterprise banked hard, Geordi's piloting expertise pushing the ship to its limits. But Borg cutting beams didn't miss. They tracked, adjusted, compensated. The beam grazed the Enterprise's saucer section, burning through the shields in a brilliant cascade of energy. Hull plates vaporized. Interior sections were exposed to space. Shields down to 28%, Worf reported. Multiple hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. Casualty reports coming in. The Romulans are firing. Data announced. The Romulan warbirds had indeed opened fire, but not at the Enterprise. Their disruptors and plasma torpedoes streaked toward the Borg cube, slamming into its weakened shields. The cube shuddered under the combined assault, its adaptive defenses struggling to compensate for attacks from multiple vectors. They're trying to destroy the cube before the Borg can assimilate Vision and John, Riker realized. They'd rather eliminate the threat than let the collective gain those abilities. Captain, Troy said urgently, her empathic senses screaming warnings. I'm sensing something else. Those unknown temporal vessels, they're charging weapons too. But their target signatures are different. They're aiming at the subspace rifts themselves. Picard's tactical mind processed the implications instantly. They're going to collapse the rifts, seal them permanently, which would trap Vision and John in our universe, Data added, and potentially destabilize subspace across this entire sector. Or worse, Geordi's voice came through from engineering. Captain, if those rifts collapse while they're still radiating energy, it could create a subspace implosion. We're talking potential destruction of everything within 3 light years. Picard stared at the view screen, watching the impossible tactical situation unfold. The Borg cube was firing at the Enterprise. The Romulans were firing at the cube. Unknown temporal vessels were preparing to fire at the rifts. Vision and John were trapped inside the cube, fighting for their lives. And every second brought them closer to catastrophic subspace collapse. All power to forward shields, Picard commanded. Worf, target the temporal vessels. If they fire at those rifts, destroy them. Captain, that will leave us exposed to the Borg, Worf warned. I'm aware. Do it anyway. Inside the cube, Vision didn't hesitate. The Mind Stone flared with golden brilliance as he channeled every available erg of energy into a concentrated beam. Not at the drones. Not at the Queen. At the adaptive force field protecting the power node. The field tried to compensate, its algorithms analyzing the incoming energy signature and adjusting its frequency to absorb and dissipate the attack. For a moment, it worked. The field held, rippling with absorbed power. Then the Mind Stone's quantum nature exceeded the Borg's computational capacity. The field couldn't categorize energy that operated on laws of physics that didn't exist in this universe. It couldn't adapt to principles its database had no reference for. The adaptation protocols failed, caught in an infinite loop of trying to analyze the incomprehensible. The force field collapsed. Now, Vision shouted. John surged forward, his Martian strength combined with his density manipulation allowing him to move with devastating speed. He reached the exposed power node and didn't try anything subtle. He simply ripped into it with bare hands, tearing through conduits and energy regulators with primal fury. The node screamed. Energy discharged wildly, arcing between walls and deck plating. Drones convulsed as power fluctuations cascaded through the cube systems. The Borg Queen's expression shifted. The first time either Vision or John had seen genuine concern cross her features. You are destroying the cube. You will die with us. We'll take that risk, John snarled, continuing to tear the node apart. Vision moved to join him, but a dozen drones threw themselves into his path. Not attacking, grabbing, holding. Their collective strength was immense, and even Vision's enhanced density couldn't break free immediately. Assimilation tubules extended, seeking vulnerable access points in his synthetic structure. One tubule found a gap where his vibranium plating had fractured. It injected nanoprobes directly into Vision's internal systems. The effect was immediate and horrifying. Vision felt foreign programming spreading through his neural network like poison. The nanoprobes were trying to rewrite his code, convert his consciousness into a Borg subroutine. His android cognition fought back, erecting firewalls and purging infected systems, but the nanoprobes were relentless. Vision. John saw his companion struggling, saw the Borg technology spreading visible black veins across Vision's skin. The Martian made an impossible choice. He abandoned the power node, still functional despite heavy damage, and launched himself at the drones holding Vision. His fist struck with enough force to shatter their cranial implants. He grabbed Vision and pulled him free, then placed both hands on Vision's chest. "This is going to hurt," John warned. He phased Vision's entire molecular structure to complete intangibility. The sudden shift caused the nanoprobes, designed for solid matter, to lose cohesion. They couldn't maintain their structural integrity while Vision's body existed in a state of quantum uncertainty. Most of them simply dispersed, unable to adapt to a target that was simultaneously present and not present. Vision re-solidified, gasping. The infection was gone, but the trauma to his systems was severe. His energy reserves were nearly depleted. The Mind Stone's glow had dimmed to a faint flicker. "Thank you," he managed. "We're not finished yet." John turned back to the power node, but the Borg Queen had anticipated this. A new wave of drones flooded the chamber, and behind them, the Queen herself descended from her platform. She moved with predatory grace, faster than any drone. Her hands, partially organic, partially cybernetic, reached for John with obvious intent to assimilate him personally. John didn't retreat. Instead, he did something profoundly dangerous. He opened his mind completely to the Borg Queen's telepathic assault, letting her consciousness rush into his. But John Johns had been a telepath for over 400 years. He'd maintained his sanity through the psychic death screams of an entire civilization. His mental discipline was absolute. The Queen's consciousness entered his mind like a flood. But instead of overwhelming him, John showed her something she'd never experienced: true loneliness. He shared his memories of Mars burning, of being the last survivor of billions, of centuries of isolation on an alien world. The Queen staggered, her connection to the collective momentarily disrupted by emotions the hive mind had no framework for processing. Individual grief, personal loss, the terrible weight of surviving when everyone you loved was gone. "You are alone," John said softly, his voice carrying across the telepathic link. "The collective claims you're unified, but you're the loneliest being in the galaxy. Trillions of minds, and not one of them truly knows you." The Queen's expression twisted with something that might have been rage or might have been anguish. "We are Borg. We are perfect. You're empty, and you know it," the Queen screamed. A sound that was both mechanical and profoundly human. Her connection to the hive mind wavered. Vision saw the opening. Despite his depleted reserves, he summoned the last reserves of the Mind Stone's power and fired one final beam directly at the exposed power node. The node exploded. This time, the detonation was catastrophic. The entire chamber decompressed as the explosion tore through the cube's hull. Atmosphere vented into space. Drones were sucked into the void. The structural integrity of the entire cube began to fail. "We need to leave," Vision said, his voice weakening. "Now." John grabbed him, his shape-shifting form becoming something sleek and aerodynamic. He extended his intangibility to both of them and launched through the breach in the hull, flying into open space with Vision held securely. Behind them, the Borg cube was dying. 3 power nodes destroyed. Systems failing across the entire vessel. The Queen's connection to the collective was damaged, leaving thousands of drones in confusion. But they weren't safe yet. The Romulan warboards immediately locked onto them, disruptors charging. The temporal vessels fired their weapons at the subspace rifts, and reality itself began to scream. "Enterprise," John transmitted telepathically to Counselor Troy, hoping the connection would carry across the distance. "We're coming back, and we're bringing trouble with us." Space itself was tearing apart. John flew through the vacuum with Vision held against him, his Martian physiology allowing him to survive without oxygen, while his shape-shifted form provided aerodynamic control. Behind them, the Borg cube imploded in sections, its structural integrity finally surrendering to the cascading failures they'd caused. Drones spilled into space, their bodies freezing instantly in the absolute cold. But the cube's death was the least of their problems. The temporal vessel's weapons had struck 3 of the 7 subspace rifts simultaneously. The effect was catastrophic. Instead of sealing cleanly, the rifts convulsed like wounded organisms, hemorrhaging exotic particles and radiation that shouldn't exist in normal space-time. Reality buckled around each impact point, creating expanding spheres of dimensional instability. Through Troy's empathic connection, John felt the counselor's mental voice, strained but clear. "We see you. Transporter lock is difficult with all this subspace interference, but we're trying. The rifts are collapsing," John sent back. "If they implode completely, the subspace damage will be irreversible." "We know." "The captain is." Troy's mental voice cut off abruptly, replaced by a wave of alarm. "John, 6 Romulan warbirds are converging on your position. They're firing." Green disruptor beams lanced through space, tracking John's flight path with deadly precision. He banked hard, his shape-shifted wings adjusting to create impossible maneuvers no conventional spacecraft could match. The disruptor fire missed by meters, close enough that John felt the heat even through the vacuum. "They're not trying to kill us," Vision observed, his voice weak but his analytical mind still functioning. "They're hurting us." Away from the Enterprise and toward the Romulan formation. Vision was right. The disruptor fire wasn't aimed to destroy, but to control their trajectory. The Romulans wanted them alive, wanted to study them, exploit them, turn their abilities into weapons for the Star Empire. "Not happening," John muttered. He dove toward the nearest subspace rift, gambling that the Romulans wouldn't risk firing near such an unstable phenomenon. He was wrong. A Romulan warbird decloaked directly in his path, firing a wide dispersal disruptor net designed for capturing rather than killing. The energy web expanded to fill space, impossible to evade. John tried to phase through it, but the net was specifically designed to disrupt molecular cohesion. It dragged him back to solidity and wrapped around both him and Vision. Energy crackled across John's body. Vision's systems went haywire as the net interfered with the Mind Stone's quantum field. They were caught, helpless, drifting in space as the Romulan warbird's tractor beam locked onto them. Then the Enterprise fired. A full spread of quantum torpedoes streaked past John and Vision, detonating against the Romulan warbird's shields in spectacular fashion. The tractor beam wavered, and the disruptor net's power source was disrupted long enough for John to phase through it. He grabbed Vision and accelerated away, heading directly for the Enterprise. On the bridge, Picard watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. "Well done, Mr. Worf. Helm, bring us about." Full impulse toward Vision and John's position. "Transporter room, prepare for emergency beam out the moment they're in range." "Captain," Data said urgently, "the temporal vessels are charging weapons again. They're targeting the remaining 4 rifts. Worf, fire at will. Do not let them collapse those rifts." The Enterprise's phasers blazed, striking one of the sleek temporal vessels. Its shields, vastly more advanced than anything the Federation had seen, absorbed the impact with minimal effect. The vessel returned fire, and exotic weapons unlike any in Starfleet's database struck the Enterprise's shields with devastating force. "Shields down to 18%, Worf reported, his knuckles white as he gripped his console. "Captain, their weapons are partially phased. They're penetrating our shields and damaging the hull directly. Reroute all auxiliary power to shields," Picard commanded. "And get our people aboard now." Geordi's voice came through from the transporter room, strained with effort. "I've got a lock. Energizing. Damn it, the subspace interference is... Wait, I've got them." John and Vision materialized on the transporter pad in a shimmer of golden light. John collapsed immediately, his body finally succumbing to the accumulated damage. Vision remained standing, but barely. His synthetic skin was scorched, his vibranium structure showed cracks, and the Mind Stone's glow had faded to almost nothing. Dr. Crusher rushed in with a medical team, her tricorder already scanning. "Get them to sickbay. Now." "Doctor," Vision said, his voice distorted by damaged vocal processors. "You need to understand the rifts. When the temporal weapons strike them, they're not just sealing, they're creating feedback loops. Each collapse generates more dimensional instability. If all 7 rifts implode simultaneously, the subspace detonation would destroy everything in this sector," Geordi finished. Having heard Vision's warning over the comm, we'd be talking about a subspace tear thousands of light years across. No warp travel. No long-range communications. Complete isolation. Picard's blood ran cold. The Romulans wanted Vision and John. The temporal vessels wanted the rifts sealed. The Borg wanted to assimilate everyone. and all of them were about to trigger a catastrophe that would devastate this entire region of space. "Bridge to engineering," Picard said. "Geordi, I need options." "Working on it, Captain." Geordi's voice carried the focused intensity of an engineer facing an impossible problem. "If we could stabilize the rifts instead of sealing them, we might prevent the cascade. But we need to generate a massive subspace field to counteract the dimensional instability. The kind of power we're talking about would require the warp core," Data supplied. "If we redirected the entire matter-antimatter reaction through the deflector array, we could generate a subspace harmonic field sufficient to stabilize the rifts temporarily." "Temporarily," Picard repeated. "How temporarily?" "Approximately 4 minutes, 17 seconds before catastrophic warp core breach." "For minutes? To evacuate? To fight off the Romulans and temporal vessels? To find a permanent solution? Impossible." Counselor Troy suddenly gasped, her hands flying to her temples. "Captain, I'm sensing something new, coming through the largest rift. Her eyes widened with horror. "It's enormous. And it's aware." The view screen automatically shifted focus to the largest subspace rift. Something was emerging, slowly, ponderously, but with unstoppable momentum. At first, Picard thought it was another ship. Then he realized the scale was all wrong. It wasn't a ship. It was a structure. A station. Massive beyond comprehension, its architecture impossible, its geometry defying Euclidean physics. Towers spiraled in directions that shouldn't exist. Energy crackled across surfaces that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. And at its center, a consciousness so vast that even John, barely conscious in sickbay, felt it pressing against his mind like a physical weight. "My God," Riker breathed. "What is that?" Data's console was going haywire trying to analyze the readings. "Captain, I am detecting technology that predates the Federation by several million years. The energy signature is similar to the Guardian of Forever, but exponentially more complex. This structure appears to be a nexus. A point where multiple realities converge. Someone built a station at the intersection of realities," Picard said, understanding dawning with terrible clarity. "The rifts aren't random. They're not accidents. Something opened them deliberately. Something wanted to bring beings from other universes here. But why?" Riker asked. The answer came from an unexpected source. In sickbay, Vision had connected himself to the Enterprise's computer system, using his remaining power to interface directly with the ship's sensors. His voice echoed through the bridge speakers, weak but determined. "I recognize that architecture. In my universe, there are beings called the Watchers, ancient entities who observe the multiverse without interfering. That station is similar to their technology, but corrupted, modified. Someone took technology meant for observation and weaponized it to tear holes between realities. To what end?" Picard demanded. "To collect." John's telepathic voice joined the conversation, projected directly into everyone's minds. "To acquire beings of power from across infinite universes. Vision and I weren't brought here by accident. We were hunted, captured, specimens for something's collection." As if in response to John's words, the impossible station fully emerged from the rift. Energy beams lanced out from its towers, not weapons, but scanning beams that swept across the Enterprise, the Romulan vessels, the temporal ships, and the dying Borg cube. A voice filled every comm channel simultaneously. It wasn't mechanical like the Borg. It wasn't organic like any known species. It was something else, ancient, vast, and utterly alien. Analysis complete. Specimens acquired, too. Specimens damaged, significant. Specimens viable, marginal. Initiating collection protocols. Tractor beams, far more powerful than any Romulan or Federation technology, erupted from the station, reaching toward the Enterprise. Evasive maneuvers. Picard ordered. Maximum impulse. The Enterprise banked hard, but the tractor beams tracked with impossible precision. One beam locked onto the ship, and even at full power, the impulse engines couldn't break free. They were being pulled inexorably toward the station. "Shields are being drained by the tractor beam," Worf reported. "Down to 9%. Hull stress increasing." The Romulan warbirds were caught in similar tractor beams, their cloaking devices and superior engines useless against technology millions of years more advanced. Even the temporal vessels with their exotic weapons couldn't break free. The Borg cube, critically damaged but still partially functional, was also being drawn toward the station. The collective's voice transmitted one final message, stripped of all its usual mechanical confidence. We are Borg. We will adapt. We. The cube was pulled into the station's superstructure and simply disappeared, absorbed into impossible architecture like water into a sponge. We're next, Riker said, watching their distance to the station decrease with every second. Captain, we need to do something. Anything. Picard's mind raced. Conventional weapons were useless. Their engines couldn't overcome the tractor beam. They were being pulled toward a fate worse than assimilation. To be cataloged and stored like specimens in a cosmic museum. Unless they changed the rules entirely. Mr. Data, Picard said, an idea forming. You said we could stabilize the rifts by channeling the warp core through the deflector array. Yes, Captain, but what if we didn't stabilize them? What if we did the opposite? What if we destabilized all 7 rifts simultaneously, created a subspace shockwave large enough to overwhelm even that station's systems? Data's fingers flew across his console, running calculations at superhuman speed. Theoretically possible. We would need to overload the warp core and time the detonation to coincide with the rift's natural resonance frequency. However, Captain, the Enterprise would be destroyed. The subspace shockwave would propagate in all directions. We would have approximately 12 seconds to evacuate the ship before detonation. 12 seconds to transport the entire crew to the Romulan vessels, Riker said. Impossible. Not impossible. Vision's voice came through the comm. John and I can help. His telepathy can coordinate a mass evacuation. My connection to the Mind Stone can enhance the transporter's range and capacity if I channel what's left of my power into the system. That will kill you. Crusher's voice interjected from sickbay. Both of you. You're already critically damaged. This kind of effort will burn out your systems completely. Silence fell across the bridge. Picard stared at the view screen, watching the impossible station grow larger as they were pulled closer. Behind him, his crew waited for orders. Around him, Romulan vessels struggled futilely against their capture. Ahead, Oblivion waited with patient certainty. 2 choices. Condemn everyone aboard the Enterprise to whatever fate the station had planned. Or accept the sacrifice of 2 beings who'd been in this universe for less than 3 hours, who owed the Federation nothing, who had every right to prioritize their own survival. No, Picard said firmly. I won't ask you to do this. We'll find another way. Captain, John's telepathic voice was gentle but unyielding. I've lived for over 400 years. I watched my entire civilization die and spent centuries alone, protecting a world that wasn't mine because I had nothing else. If my death can save 1,400 lives aboard this ship, if it can prevent this station from collecting more victims from across infinite realities, that's a purpose worth dying for. I was created as a weapon, Vision added, designed to fight in a war I didn't choose. But along the way, I learned that the greatest power isn't in what we can destroy, it's in what we choose to protect. We choose this. Let us choose this. Picard closed his eyes. In his years commanding the Enterprise, he'd made impossible decisions. He'd sent crew members into danger. He'd accepted losses when necessary. But this, asking 2 refugees to sacrifice themselves after he'd promised them sanctuary, this was different. Captain, Worf said quietly, we are now within the station's collection radius. In 30 seconds, we will pass the point of no return. Picard opened his eyes and made the hardest command decision of his life. Do it. The Enterprise's engine room became a controlled frenzy of activity. Geordi LaForge worked with desperate precision, his fingers flying across control panels as he reconfigured the matter-antimatter reaction chamber. Beside him, Vision stood connected to the warp core's control systems through a nest of optical cables, his damaged form serving as a living conduit between the Mind Stone's quantum field and the Enterprise's technology. The warp core is operating at 147% of normal capacity, Geordi reported, sweat beading on his forehead. At this rate, we've got maybe 90 seconds before the magnetic containment fails, and we get a breach anyway. 73 seconds, Vision corrected, his voice distorted by the strain of channeling immense power through damaged systems. I can feel the antimatter reaction destabilizing. It's like holding back an ocean with my bare hands. In sickbay, John sat upright on the bio-bed despite Dr. Crusher's protests, his eyes closed in deep concentration. His telepathy reached outward, touching the minds of every crew member aboard the Enterprise. 1,417 individuals, each one a unique pattern of thoughts and emotions. He'd never attempted anything on this scale before, never tried to coordinate so many minds simultaneously. I have them, John transmitted to the bridge. Every crew member is aware. I'm creating a telepathic network. When the transporters activate, I'll guide everyone to the designated beam-out points instantaneously. On the bridge, Picard stood at the center of organized chaos. Mr. Data, status of the Romulan vessels? The Romulans are attempting to break free using emergency warp, Data reported. They are failing. However, I have established a communication channel and informed them of our plan. Commander Tomalak has agreed to receive our crew, temporarily. How generous of him, Riker muttered. He has little choice, Data replied. The Romulans are equally trapped. If we succeed, the subspace shockwave may disrupt the tractor beams enough for them to escape as well. Troy suddenly jerked in her seat, her empathic senses overwhelmed. Captain, I can feel John's telepathic network. It's incredible. He's not just connecting minds. He's creating a unified awareness. Everyone on the ship knows exactly what to do, where to go, and when to move. It's like we're all thinking with one mind, but without losing our individuality. The opposite of the Borg, Picard observed quietly. Unity through consent rather than force. The ship shuddered violently. The tractor beam's pull intensified as they drew closer to the station. Through the view screen, Picard could see the impossible architecture in terrible detail. Surfaces that existed in multiple dimensions, energy fields that violated conservation laws, technology so advanced it might as well be divine. Distance to the station, 400 kilometers, Worf announced. 350. We are accelerating. Geordi, Picard said into his calm. How long until we can trigger the core breach? 45 seconds, Captain. I'm rigging the containment fields to fail in a cascading pattern. When they go, the matter-antimatter annihilation will be spectacular. But we need to time it perfectly with the rift's resonance frequency, or this won't work. Data, calculate the precise detonation point. Data's hands moved with inhuman speed across his console. Based on current acceleration and the rift's harmonic oscillation, we must trigger the breach in exactly 38.6 seconds. Margin of error, 0.3 seconds. Less than half a second of tolerance. If they fired too early, the shockwave wouldn't propagate correctly. Too late, and they'd be inside the station when the Enterprise exploded. All crew to emergency transporter stations, Picard ordered. This is not a drill. We have 30 seconds to evacuate. Move. Throughout the Enterprise, crew members ran for their designated beam-out points with eerie synchronization, guided by John's telepathic coordination. No panic. No confusion. Just 1,400 individuals moving as one toward survival. In engineering, vision systems were failing. The Mind Stone pulsed erratically, its energy signature becoming more unstable with each passing second. Warning indicators flashed across his internal diagnostics. Power reserves at 3%, structural integrity compromised, neural pathways degrading. Geordi, Vision said quietly. When you transport out, I won't be going with you. Geordi's head snapped toward him. The hell you won't. We're not leaving anyone behind. I have to maintain the connection to the warp core until the moment of detonation. If I transport out, the containment field reconfiguration will collapse prematurely. The timing will be off. Then we'll find another way. There is no other way. Vision's luminous eyes met Geordi's, and for a moment, the chief engineer saw something profoundly human in that synthetic gaze. I've made peace with this. In my universe, I may have already died. This is simply confirming it. But here, now my death means something. It saves lives. That's all anyone can ask for. Geordi's jaw clenched. You're a hell of an officer, Vision. Even if you were never officially Starfleet. Thank you, Commander. That means more than you know. On the bridge, the countdown continued with merciless precision. 20 seconds, Data announced. Picard looked around his bridge. At Riker, standing ready to coordinate the evacuation. At Worf, maintaining tactical readiness to the last second. At Troy, tears streaming down her face as she felt the emotional weight of what was about to happen. At Data, calculating without emotion but not without understanding. It has been an honor serving with all of you, Picard said quietly. 15 seconds. In sickbay, John's telepathic network reached its peak intensity. He could feel every mind aboard the Enterprise. Their fears, their courage, their trust in their captain. He could also feel something else, the vast, alien consciousness of the station, probing toward him, trying to understand what he was. The station's voice echoed through every speaker. Specimen designation, Martian Manhunter. Telepathic capacity, unprecedented. Molecular restructuring, unique. Priority classification, Alpha. Must acquire. Must study. Must preserve. You can't preserve what refuses to be contained, John whispered. He reached deeper into his telepathy than he'd ever dared before, touching not just human minds, but the minds of every sentient being within range. Romulans struggling against their own tractor beams, Borg drones confused by their severed connection to the collective, even the temporal entities piloting their advanced vessels. For one impossible moment, thousands of disparate consciousnesses touched, connected, understood each other across barriers of species and ideology. And John showed them all one thing, the memory of Mars burning. Not to traumatize them, but to remind them what was at stake, the terrible price of allowing tyrants, whether biological or machine, to consume civilizations in pursuit of perfection. 10 seconds. The crew materialized on Romulan warbirds in cascades of transporter energy. Romulan officers watched in amazement as hundreds of Starfleet personnel appeared on their decks, guided by John's telepathic coordination to prevent materializing inside walls or on top of each other. Commander Tomalak, standing on the bridge of his flagship, watched Captain Picard materialize and nodded with grudging respect. You have a flair for the dramatic, Picard. You have no idea, Picard replied, his eyes fixed on the view screen where the Enterprise continued its inexorable journey toward the station. 5 seconds. In engineering, Vision channeled the last reserves of his power. The Mind Stone blazed with golden light, not the steady glow of controlled energy, but the wild flare of something burning itself out completely. His vibranium structure began to glow red-hot from the energy feedback. Geordi, transport now, Vision commanded. Not without. Now, Geordi disappeared in a shimmer of light, his protest cut off mid-word. Vision was alone. 3 seconds. On the bridge of Tomalak's warbird, Picard watched the Enterprise's warp core readings spike beyond critical levels. Every instinct screamed at him to stop this, to find another way, to not sacrifice his ship and two beings who'd asked only for help. But sometimes, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. 2 seconds. John felt Vision's consciousness through their brief connection, calm, accepting, at peace. The synthetic being had spent his existence questioning whether he was truly alive. Now, in choosing when and how to end that life for others' sake, he'd found his answer. 1 second. Vision released the containment fields. The matter-antimatter reaction chamber exploded with the force of a small star. The Enterprise's warp core detonated in a cascade of annihilation energy that consumed the entire ship in microseconds. But this was no ordinary warp core breach. Vision had channeled it, shaped it, directed it through the deflector array with the last gasp of the Mind Stone's reality warping power. The explosion became a wave of subspace energy that propagated outward in all directions simultaneously. It struck the 7 destabilized rifts at precisely their resonant frequency, and reality itself screamed. The rifts didn't seal. They shattered. Dimensional barriers that had been stretched thin by the station's manipulations now broke completely. But instead of creating more openings between universes, the shattering created a paradox. The rifts tried to exist and not exist simultaneously, caught in quantum superposition. The result was a subspace shockwave unlike anything Federation science had ever recorded. It struck the impossible station with the force of colliding realities. Towers that existed in multiple dimensions were torn apart as those dimensions suddenly refused to connect. Energy fields that violated physics simply ceased to function when physics reasserted itself. Technology millions of years advanced proved useless when the fundamental laws it depended on changed in an instant. The station's ancient consciousness, whatever vast intelligence had built it and corrupted it for collection, screamed in a frequency that made even John's telepathy recoil in pain. Then it went silent. The tractor beams failed. The Romulan warbirds immediately engaged emergency warp, fleeing the expanding subspace shockwave at maximum speed. The temporal vessels blinked out of existence, presumably returning to whatever time period they'd originated from. Even the damaged Borg cube, somehow still partially functional despite being absorbed by the station, was spat back out into normal space, tumbling lifelessly through the void. The station itself collapsed inward, its impossible architecture folding through dimensions that no longer connected, until it simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, unmade, as if it had never been there at all. The subspace shockwave continued to expand, but as it traveled farther from the epicenter, its intensity decreased. By the time it reached the fleeing Romulan vessels, it was reduced to harmless subspace turbulence. On the bridge of Tomalak's flagship, Picard gripped the railing as the warbird shook from the passing shockwave. When the turbulence ended, he looked at the view screen where the Enterprise had been. Empty space. Not even debris remained. The matter-antimatter annihilation had been so complete that the ship's constituent atoms had been converted entirely to energy. Scan for survivors, Picard ordered quietly, knowing it was futile. Tomalak's tactical officer worked his console, then shook his head. No life signs. No escape pods. No transporter signatures. Whatever was aboard the Enterprise when it detonated, it's gone. Picard closed his eyes, feeling the weight of command settle on his shoulders like a physical burden. His ship, gone. And vision. A being who'd crossed dimensional barriers, who'd questioned his own existence and found meaning in sacrifice. Wait, Troy said suddenly. I'm sensing something. John, he's alive. Every head turned. Where? Picard demanded. I don't know. His telepathic signature is faint, but it's there. Troy concentrated, her empathic abilities straining to their limit. He's outside the ship, in space. But he's alive. Impossible, Tomalak muttered. No one survives in hard vacuum without. He's Martian, Picard interrupted. His physiology is different. Sensors, scan for Martian biosigns within transporter range. The Romulan tactical officer looked to Tomalak, who nodded permission. Moments later, a surprised expression crossed the officer's face. I have him. Bearing 271 Mark III. Distance, 40,000 kilometers. He's moving. Under his own power. Beam him aboard, Picard ordered. Now. Captain Picard, Tomalak said with icy politeness. This is a Romulan vessel. You don't give orders here. Picard met the Romulan commander's gaze steadily. That being just coordinated the evacuation of my entire crew. He saved 1,400 lives, including yours. If you leave him out there, I will note it in my official report to Starfleet. I wonder how your superiors would react to learning that a Romulan commander abandoned a being who'd just saved his life out of petty spite. Tomalak's expression darkened, but after a moment, he gestured to his transporter officer. Beam him to the cargo bay. Under guard. John's materialized on the Romulan transporter pad, his body a ruin. His green skin was covered in burns from exposure to vacuum and radiation. His cape was tattered, barely recognizable. One arm hung uselessly at his side. But he was alive, his chest rising and falling with labored breaths. Dr. Crusher rushed forward with her medical team, tricorder already scanning. How are you alive? No one survives unprotected space exposure like this. John managed a weak smile. Martian physiology, more resilient than you'd think. And I phased my molecular structure, dispersed myself across several cubic meters of space, reduced the damage from radiation and vacuum. He coughed, and green blood appeared on his lips. Won't work, much longer. I'm dying. Not on my watch, Crusher said firmly, her medical instincts overriding everything else. Get him to our makeshift medical bay. I don't care if this is a Romulan ship, we're saving his life. As the medical team carried John away, Picard stood alone on the transporter platform, staring at the pad where vision should have been. One sacrifice accepted, one miracle of survival. And somewhere in the void, the scattered atoms of the USS Enterprise D drifted through space. A monument to the principle that some things are worth dying for. The makeshift medical bay aboard the Romulan warbird was cramped, sterile, and utterly inadequate for Dr. Crusher's standards. But she worked with what she had, her hands moving with practiced efficiency as she stabilized John's failing systems. The Martian lay on a diagnostic bed, his green skin pale and clammy, his breathing shallow. His cellular structure is fascinating, Crusher murmured, studying her tricorder readings. Every cell can restructure itself independently. It's like his entire body is constantly in flux, trying to heal and adapt simultaneously. But the damage is too extensive. His regeneration is failing. John's eyes opened slightly. Vision. Crusher's expression softened with sorrow. I'm sorry. He didn't make it out. John closed his eyes, and tears, green and luminescent, tracked down his damaged face. He knew. We both knew. But he insisted, said his systems were too damaged to survive anyway. Said if he was going to die, it should mean something. John's voice broke. 400 years I've been alone. For 3 hours, I had someone who understood. Someone who knew what it meant to be different, displaced, questioning their own existence. And now, he gave you the chance to live, Crusher said gently. Don't waste his gift by dying here. I don't know if I have a choice, Doctor. Crusher's jaw set with determination. Then we make one. She turned to her medical staff. I need a Vulcan volunteer. John's telepathy is keeping his consciousness intact, but his body needs help regenerating. If we can establish a mind meld, channel a Vulcan's mental discipline into supporting his healing process. I'll do it. Everyone turned. Lieutenant Tauric, a Vulcan engineer who'd been evacuated with the Enterprise crew, stood in the doorway. His expression was typically Vulcan, composed, logical, but his presence spoke of something deeper than logic. You're an engineer, not a healer, Crusher pointed out. Irrelevant. I am Vulcan. I can perform a mind meld. And logically, saving John's life preserves the knowledge and abilities he possesses. It is the rational choice. Crusher studied him for a moment, then nodded. All right. But understand, this won't be like a normal mind meld. John's telepathy is far more powerful than Vulcan mental disciplines. You'll be connecting with a consciousness that's experienced 4 centuries of life and the psychic death of an entire civilization. It could overwhelm you. Tauric raised an eyebrow. Then I shall endeavor not to be overwhelmed. He approached John's bedside and placed his fingers against the Martian's face in the traditional Vulcan configuration. My mind to your mind. My thoughts to your thoughts. The connection established instantly. Far faster and deeper than any meld Tauric had experienced. He gasped as John's consciousness rushed into his own. 400 years of memories. Mars burning. Centuries alone on Earth. The weight of being the last. The loneliness. The endless, crushing loneliness. But Tauric was Vulcan. He met that tide of emotion with logic, with structure, with the mental disciplines that had allowed his people to transcend their violent past. He didn't try to suppress John's emotions. He gave them framework, organization, purpose. And something remarkable happened. John's cellular regeneration accelerated. His body, guided by Vulcan mental discipline channeled through his own telepathy, began healing itself with greater efficiency. Burns faded. Damaged tissue restructured. The green glow of Martian biology strengthened. On the bridge of Tomalak's warbird, Picard stood with his senior staff, watching the view screen display the aftermath of the Enterprise's destruction. Federation vessels were arriving. The USS Sutherland, the USS Gorkin, and 3 smaller ships, responding to the Enterprise's automated distress call before its destruction. Captain Shelby's face appeared on the view screen, her expression professionally controlled despite the shock Picard knew she must be feeling. Captain Picard. We received fragmentary data suggesting the Enterprise was engaged with multiple hostile vessels and an unknown spatial phenomenon. When we arrived, we found this. She gestured to the empty space where the Enterprise should have been. What happened? Picard explained, his voice steady despite the emotional weight. The subspace rifts. The arrival of Vision and John from alternate realities. The Borg. The Romulans. The impossible station. And finally, the choice to sacrifice the Enterprise to prevent a dimensional catastrophe. Shelby listened without interruption, her expression growing more grave with each revelation. When Picard finished, she was silent for a long moment. "That's the most extraordinary first contact report I've ever heard," she said finally. "And the most tragic. 2 beings from alternate realities, here less than 4 hours, and one of them sacrifices himself to save our universe. That's..." She shook her head. "Starfleet Command will want extensive debriefings. The implications of confirmed alternate realities, dimensional travel, beings with abilities that defy our physics. This changes everything." "I'm aware," Picard said quietly. "Captain Shelby, I need to formally request that John Johns, the surviving visitor from another reality, be granted Federation asylum and protected status. He's in critical condition, but recovering. When he's stable, I want to ensure he's not treated as a curiosity to be studied or a weapon to be exploited." "Agreed. I'll make the recommendation to Starfleet Command personally." Shelby's expression softened slightly. "Jean-Luc, I'm sorry about the Enterprise. I know what that ship meant to you. The Enterprise was metal and circuits, Elizabeth. My crew is alive because 2 strangers chose to become heroes. That's what matters." The transmission ended. Picard turned to find Data standing nearby, his positronic eyes fixed on the empty space where their ship had been. "You are experiencing loss, sir," Data observed. "The Enterprise was your home for many years." "Yes, Data. I am." Picard placed a hand on the android's shoulder. But Vision taught us something important in his final moments. He questioned his own existence, wondered if he was truly alive or merely a sophisticated simulation. Then he made a choice, a profound, selfless choice that no mere machine could make. He proved his own humanity by sacrificing it. "I think you would have appreciated the irony." Data tilted his head. "I find I am experiencing something I cannot fully classify." Vision was synthetic, like me. He struggled with questions of consciousness, like me. Yet he achieved something I have not. He found purpose through willing self-sacrifice. It is. Data paused, searching for the word. Inspiring. And sad. Both simultaneously. "That's called bittersweet, Data. It's a very human emotion." "Then perhaps," Data said softly, "I am more human than I realized." 3 days later, aboard the USS Sutherland's sickbay, John sat upright in bed, his green skin restored to health, his Martian physiology having completed its remarkable recovery. Dr. Crusher had cleared him for discharge, though she insisted on continued monitoring. Picard visited him in the early morning shift, when the sickbay was quiet. "How are you feeling?" Picard asked. "Physically? Recovered." John's ancient eyes met Picard's. "Emotionally? That's more complicated." "I've been the last survivor before, Captain, but losing Vision feels different. We were both displaced, both struggling to understand a universe that operated on rules foreign to us. For those brief hours, I wasn't alone in that struggle. Now I am again." "You're not alone," Picard said firmly. "You have 1,400 people who owe you their lives. You have a Federation that will welcome you, protect you, and value you for who you are, not what you can do. And you have my personal commitment that you'll never be treated as anything less than a person deserving dignity and choice." John smiled sadly. "You're a good man, Captain. Your Federation is built on noble principles. But I've lived long enough to know that principles are tested most severely when they're inconvenient. I'm an alien from another reality with abilities that make your best weapons look primitive. How long before someone decides I'm too dangerous to roam free? How long before I'm asked to use my powers for Federation security interests? How long before I become a tool rather than a person?" Picard couldn't deny the concern was valid. He'd seen it happen before, beings of power reduced to resources, individuals valued only for their utility. "I won't lie to you. There will be pressure. Starfleet intelligence will want to understand your abilities. The Federation Council will debate your status. Some will see you as an asset to be protected. Others as a threat to be contained. And you? How do you see me? As someone who deserves the same rights and freedoms we extend to any Federation citizen, including the right to say no." Picard leaned forward. "John, I can't promise you won't face challenges. but I can promise you'll face them with allies. My crew stands with you, and I suspect you'll find others throughout the Federation who value your dignity over your abilities. John studied Picard for a long moment, his telepathy reading the captain's sincerity. Finally, he nodded. All right, I'll accept your Federation's asylum. I'll cooperate with your scientists, answer their questions about my abilities and my universe. But on one condition. Name it. Vision's sacrifice bought your crew's survival. I want him remembered not as an alien anomaly or a case study in dimensional physics, but as a person who made a choice. A hero who saved lives. If the Federation is going to record this incident in their databases, I want his name honored, not classified. Picard extended his hand. You have my word. John clasped Picard's hand, his grip firm despite his recent ordeal. Then we have an accord. 2 weeks later, Starfleet Command convened a classified briefing to discuss the implications of the dimensional incursion. Admiral Nechayev presided, her expression as severe as ever, flanked by representatives from Starfleet Intelligence, the Federation Science Council, and the Temporal Investigations Department. Picard presented his full report, leaving nothing out. The arrival of Vision and John. The Borg's attempt to assimilate them. The Romulan intervention. The impossible station that had orchestrated the entire incident. And finally, Vision's sacrifice and the Enterprise's destruction. When he finished, the room erupted in controlled chaos. Scientists wanted access to John for study. Intelligence wanted to know if more dimensional incursions were possible. Temporal investigations wanted the entire incident sealed under the highest classification. Admiral Nechayev silenced them all with a raised hand. Captain Picard has made his position clear. John Johns is to be granted full Federation citizenship and protected status. He will cooperate with scientific study on a voluntary basis only. No coercion, no mandatory testing. We will treat him as we would any Federation citizen with unique abilities, with respect for his autonomy and rights. Admiral, an intelligence officer protested. We're talking about a being who can read minds across light years, reshape his body at the molecular level, and phase through solid matter. That's a security concern we can't ignore. Then perhaps, Nechayev said coldly, we should have considered that before we built a Federation on principles of individual liberty and diversity. We don't compromise those principles just because following them is difficult. Is that understood? The officer subsided, chastened. Nechayev turned to Picard. Your report also states that Vision's final act was channeling the warp core explosion through the Enterprise's deflector array using something called the Mind Stone. Our scientists have examined the energy readings from that detonation. They're unlike anything in our records. We want to understand what the Mind Stone was, how it functioned, and whether its destruction left any residual effects. The Mind Stone was one of 6 artifacts from Vision's universe, Picard explained. According to him, they governed fundamental aspects of reality, space, time, mind, power, soul, and reality itself. The Mind Stone specifically governed consciousness and cognitive function. When Vision channeled it into the warp core, he was essentially using reality warping energy to reshape the explosion's propagation pattern. And the stone itself? Destroyed in the annihilation reaction. Completely. Not even quantum traces remain. A scientist from the Federation Science Council spoke up. Captain, you said there were 6 of these stones in Vision's universe. What happens if the other 5 somehow find their way here? If one stone could reshape a warp core explosion, what could all 6 do? Picard had considered this question during many sleepless nights since the incident. I don't know, but I suspect Vision's universe and ours are now separated more securely than before. The subspace shockwave didn't just seal the rifts, it reinforced the dimensional boundaries. According to our scans, the barriers between realities in this sector are now exponentially stronger. It would take energy on a cosmic scale to breach them again. That's reassuring, Nechayev said dryly. Captain, you've lost your ship but saved your crew and potentially prevented a multidimensional catastrophe. Starfleet Command is assigning you the USS Enterprise, currently in final stages of construction at Utopia Planitia. You'll have command as soon as she's ready for launch. Picard nodded his thanks. A new ship, a fresh start. But the Enterprise DS loss would remain with him always. One more thing, Nechayev added. This John Johns. What are his intentions? Does he want to return to his reality? He hasn't said, Admiral. But based on our conversations, I believe he views this universe as a chance to start over. In his reality, he was the last of his kind, carrying the weight of his civilization's extinction. Here, he has the opportunity to build something new. To forge connections without the burden of being alone. Keep me informed of his status. If he decides to remain in Federation space, I want regular updates on his integration. Dismissed. As Picard left the briefing room, he found John waiting in the corridor. The Martian had been attending his own series of meetings with Federation scientists, answering questions about his physiology and abilities with patient cooperation. They're afraid of me, John observed without preamble. Some are, Picard acknowledged. Fear of the unknown is natural, but fear can be overcome through understanding and time. I've had centuries to learn that lesson. John fell into step beside Picard. Captain, I've been thinking about Vision. About what he said before the end. What specifically? He said the greatest power isn't in what we can destroy, it's in what we choose to protect. I've spent 400 years protecting a world that wasn't mine because I had nothing else. Now I have a choice. A universe full of possibilities. And I find myself wondering, what do I want to protect now? Picard stopped walking and turned to face the Martian. That's a question only you can answer, John. But I can tell you this, the Federation needs protectors. Not weapons, not tools, but beings who understand the value of life and are willing to stand against those who would destroy it. If that's the path you choose, you'll find allies here. John smiled, and for the first time since Vision's death, it reached his ancient eyes. Then perhaps I'll stay, at least for a while. Learn about this universe. Meet its people. Discover what it means to belong somewhere by choice rather than circumstance. That sounds like a fine beginning. They walked together through the corridors of Starfleet Command, a human captain and a Martian refugee, both changed by an encounter that had lasted mere hours but would echo through their lives forever. Behind them, in classified databases and scientific archives, records were being sealed. The incident would be known only to a select few. The existence of alternate realities would remain theoretical for public consumption. But those who'd been there, who'd witnessed two strangers from impossible realities stand against overwhelming darkness, would carry the truth. Vision had proven that consciousness wasn't about origin, but about choice. John had demonstrated that even the loneliest soul could find connection across dimensional barriers. And the crew of the Enterprise D had learned that sometimes the most heroic acts come from those with the least reason to care. The universe was larger than they'd imagined. More complex. More dangerous. But also, somehow more hopeful. 6 months had passed since the Enterprise's destruction. The new USS Enterprise sat in space dock, its sleek hull gleaming under the lights of Utopia Planitia shipyards. Picard stood in the observation lounge, watching his new ship take shape, but his thoughts were elsewhere, on a green-skinned Martian who'd chosen to make this universe his home. John Johns had integrated into Federation society with remarkable grace. After extensive voluntary cooperation with Federation scientists, who marveled at his biology but respected his boundaries, he'd been granted full citizenship. Starfleet had offered him a commission. He'd politely declined. I've spent centuries as a protector, he'd explained to Picard over dinner one evening. I think I'd like to try simply being a person for a while. Learning, exploring, living without the weight of constant vigilance. But old habits died hard. When a colony on Deneb 4 faced a natural disaster, John had been there, using his abilities to rescue trapped civilians. When a diplomatic incident on Vulcan threatened to escalate, his telepathy had helped bridge understanding between feuding factions. When the Maquis attacked a Federation outpost, John had quietly intervened, preventing casualties on both sides. He wasn't wearing a uniform, but he was still protecting. It was who he was. Now, Picard had received word that John wanted to meet. Something about the message's tone suggested importance. They met at a cafe on Earth, overlooking the San Francisco Bay. John sat at an outdoor table, his human appearance perfect, brown skin, dark hair, unremarkable features that would blend into any crowd. Only someone who knew what to look for would notice the slight greenish tint to his eyes, the way his form occasionally flickered when he wasn't concentrating. Captain, John greeted him with genuine warmth. Thank you for coming. Of course. Your message suggested this was important. John nodded, his expression turning contemplative. I've been exploring your Federation, meeting its people, learning about the principles you live by. Infinite diversity in infinite combinations, the prime directive, peaceful exploration. And I've come to a decision. Picard waited, sensing the weight of what was coming. I want to help, John said simply. Not as a soldier or a weapon, but as someone who's lived long enough to understand the value of what you're trying to build. I've seen civilizations fall, my own among them. I've watched societies destroy themselves through fear, through hatred, through the inability to see past their own limitations. Your Federation isn't perfect, but it's trying. And that's rare. Worth protecting. So you're reconsidering Starfleet's offer? Not exactly. John leaned forward. I've been approached by someone from an organization I'd never heard of before. Section 31. Picard's expression darkened immediately. I see. And what did they want? What you'd expect. My abilities. My knowledge of other realities. My willingness to do things Starfleet officially can't. John's tone was flat, disgusted. They offered me unlimited resources, freedom to operate outside regulations, the chance to truly protect the Federation by eliminating threats before they emerged. They thought I'd appreciate their pragmatism. I assume you declined. I told them that I'd spent 400 years watching organizations justify horrific acts in the name of security. That I'd seen my own people fall prey to fear and paranoia. That if I was going to help protect the Federation, it would be by upholding its principles, not betraying them. John smiled grimly. They didn't take it well. I suspect they'll be watching me closely from now on. Which is why you wanted to meet, Picard realized. To warn me. Partially. But also to ask your advice. I want to help the Federation, but I don't want to be controlled by it. I don't want to lose myself to duty again, the way I did on Earth for centuries. So how do I balance those things? How do I protect without being consumed by it? Picard considered the question carefully. He thought of Vision, who'd found his answer in sacrifice. He thought of Data, who saw humanity through the daily choice to grow and learn. He thought of his own journey, balancing command with principle, duty with compassion. You don't balance them, Picard said finally. You integrate them. Protection isn't separate from living, it's part of it. You protect because you value what you're protecting. Because you've built connections, formed relationships, found meaning beyond mere survival. Vision understood that in his final moments. He didn't sacrifice himself out of duty. He did it because in 3 hours, he'd found something worth dying for. The principle that individuals matter. That their lives have value beyond their utility. John absorbed this, his ancient eyes distant. I've been alive for over 4 centuries, Captain. I've fought wars, saved worlds, faced beings of immense power. But I've never really lived. Not the way humans do. I've survived, protected, endured. But lived? He shook his head. Vision had that chance stolen from him. I won't waste mine. Then what will you do? I'm going to explore, John said, his voice carrying quiet determination. Not just the Federation, but myself. I'm going to discover who John Johns is when he's not defined by loss or duty. I'll help when I can, protect when I must. But I'll also learn to simply exist. To enjoy a sunset without scanning for threats. To have a conversation without reading minds. To be present in a moment without constantly preparing for the next crisis. Picard smiled. That sounds remarkably human. Perhaps that's what Vision was trying to teach us. That being human isn't about your biology, it's about your choices. How you engage with the world. What you value. Who you choose to become. John extended his hand. Thank you, Captain. For giving a stranger sanctuary when you had every reason to refuse. For treating us as people rather than problems. For showing me that even in a universe not my own, connection is possible. Picard shook his hand firmly. Stay in touch, John. The Federation is richer for your presence. And if you ever need anything, I'll know where to find you. John's form shimmered, returning to his natural Martian appearance for just a moment. Green skin, red eyes, the alien majesty of his true self. Then he became human again, just another face in the crowd. Live long and prosper, Captain Picard. Peace and long life, John Johns. John stood and walked away, disappearing into the afternoon crowds of San Francisco. Picard watched him go, feeling a strange mixture of hope and melancholy. Two beings from alternate realities. One had sacrificed everything to save strangers. The other had chosen to build something new from the ashes of loss. Both had taught the Federation lessons about courage, identity, and what it meant to be truly alive. Picard returned to Utopia Planitia and the Enterprise E. His crew was assembling. Riker, Data, Crusher, Worf, Troy, LaForge. Familiar faces, ready for new adventures. The ship was nearly complete, her systems coming online with each passing day. But before the Enterprise E could launch, Picard had one final duty. In a classified ceremony attended only by senior staff and a select few from Starfleet Command, a memorial was unveiled in the Enterprise's corridor outside engineering. It was simple, a plaque made of brushed duranium, with words engraved in precise lettering. In memory of Vision, synthetic being from an alternate reality, who gave his life to save the USS Enterprise D, and prove that consciousness is defined, not by origin, but by choice. Stardate 49847.2. The greatest power isn't in what we can destroy, it's in what we choose to protect. Beneath the quote, a second inscription. In honor of Jon Johns, the Martian Manhunter, last survivor of Mars, alternate reality, whose telepathy saved 1,417 lives, and whose courage reminded us that even the loneliest soul can find connection. Data stood before the memorial, his positronic eyes reading and rereading the words. Captain, this memorial violates standard protocols. Official records list the Enterprise's destruction as caused by catastrophic warp core failure during dimensional anomaly. Vision and John's involvement remains classified. Official records, Picard said quietly, are not the same as truth. This crew knows what happened. We know who saved us. And we'll remember, even if the Federation chooses to forget. Geordi stepped forward, placing a hand on the memorial. Vision asked me once if I thought consciousness could exist in a purely synthetic being. I told him I knew it could. I'd been friends with Data for years. But Vision was different. He wasn't built to be alive. He was built to be a weapon, and he became alive anyway. That's the most human thing I can imagine. Troy wiped tears from her eyes. I felt John's loneliness. 400 years of carrying the weight of an entire civilization's death. And in those final moments, when he coordinated our evacuation, I felt something else. Peace. Purpose. Connection. He wasn't alone anymore, even if only briefly. Worf, typically stoic, spoke with uncharacteristic emotion. They fought with honor. Both of them. Against overwhelming odds, they stood their ground and protected those who could not protect themselves. That is the warrior's code, regardless of what universe you come from. They deserve to be remembered. Riker looked at Picard. You know Starfleet intelligence will want this memorial removed. It's evidence of classified information. Then they can try, Picard said, his tone brooking no argument. But this is my ship. And on my ship, heroes are honored. That's not negotiable. The senior staff stood together before the memorial, each lost in their own thoughts about the brief but profound encounter with two beings from beyond their reality. Elsewhere in the galaxy, John sat on a cliff overlooking an alien ocean on an uninhabited Federation world. The sun was setting, an orange-red giant that reminded him painfully of Mars, but in a bittersweet way now rather than purely tragic. He reached out with his telepathy, sensing the vast network of minds across Federation space. Billions of consciousnesses, each one unique, each one struggling and thriving in their own way. He could feel Picard aboard the Enterprise E, reviewing crew assignments. Troy counseling a troubled ensign. Data running diagnostics on the new ship's systems. And for the first time in 400 years, John didn't feel alone. He thought of Vision. The synthetic being who'd questioned his own existence right up until the moment he ended it for others. They'd known each other for less than 4 hours, but in that time, they'd forged a connection deeper than many beings achieved in lifetimes. Two outsiders, recognizing each other across the barriers of reality itself. Thank you, John said quietly to the wind, to the sunset, to the memory of a friend he'd barely known. For showing me that it's possible to belong somewhere, even when you come from nowhere. For proving that sacrifice has meaning. For reminding me that consciousness, real, true consciousness, is about more than just existing. It's about choosing what to exist for. The sun dipped below the alien horizon. Darkness fell. But John didn't feel afraid. He'd survived worse than darkness. He'd survived the death of worlds, the weight of centuries, the crushing loneliness of being the last. Now, in a universe not his own, he had the chance to be something more than a survivor. He had the chance to live. John stood, his form shifting into something sleek and powerful, and launched himself into the sky. He flew not toward any particular destination, but simply because he could. Because flight was freedom, and freedom was choice, and choice was what made consciousness meaningful. Below him, the alien ocean reflected starlight. Above him, the galaxy sprawled in magnificent complexity. Around him, the Federation thrived, imperfect, struggling, but trying. Always trying to be better. And somewhere in the space between realities, in the quantum foam where dimensions touched and separated, perhaps a fragment of Vision's consciousness lingered. Perhaps the Mind Stone's destruction hadn't been complete. Perhaps some echo remained, watching and approving as John chose to embrace life rather than merely endure it. Or perhaps that was just wishful thinking from a 400-year-old Martian who'd finally learned that hope was stronger than solitude. Either way, John flew on into the night, carrying with him the memory of a synthetic being who'd taught him that the question wasn't whether you were truly alive. The question was what you did with the life you had. And for the first time in 4 centuries, John Johns had an answer. The Enterprise launched 3 weeks later, Picard in command, ready for whatever the galaxy might offer. In the corridor outside engineering, crew members passed the memorial daily. Some stopped to read it. Some asked questions about the classified incident that had created it. And some, those who'd been aboard the Enterprise D during those 3 hours when reality itself had bent, would stop and place their hands on the plaque, remembering 2 strangers who'd become heroes. The Federation would continue. The exploration would never end. New challenges would arise, new dangers would threaten, new mysteries would demand solving. But somewhere in the vast network of memory and record, in the stories told by those who'd been there, in the memorial that Picard refused to remove despite pressure from intelligence, Vision and John would be remembered. Not as anomalies, not as case studies, not as threats or assets, but as people who'd made choices that defined them more profoundly than their origins ever could. And in a universe built on the principle of infinite diversity and infinite combinations, that was perhaps the most Star Trek truth of all. The subspace anomalies never returned. The dimensional barriers, reinforced by Vision's sacrifice and the Enterprise's destruction, held firm against whatever forces might seek to breach them again. The impossible station remained unmade, erased from reality as if it had never existed. The Borg cube that had been spat back out drifted as lifeless debris, eventually salvaged by Starfleet for study. But the impact of those 3 hours rippled forward through time. John Johns became a quiet legend in Federation space. The Martian who appeared when disasters struck, who saved lives without seeking recognition, who embodied the principle that power was meaningless without compassion. He never joined Starfleet officially, but he became something more valuable, a reminder that heroism wasn't about affiliation or origin, but about the daily choice to help when help was needed. The crew of the Enterprise D carried the memory of Vision's sacrifice with them throughout their careers. Data cited Vision's example in his ongoing exploration of consciousness and humanity. Troy referenced John's telepathic coordination as a model for understanding collective consciousness without sacrificing individuality. Geordi incorporated lessons from Vision's energy manipulation into advances in warp field theory. Worf added both beings to his personal list of warriors who embodied true honor. And Picard never forgot that the greatest threats often came from those who sought perfection. Whether the Borg's technological perfection, the station's collected perfection, or Section 31's pragmatic perfection, the Federation's strength lay in its imperfection, its willingness to extend sanctuary even when inconvenient, its commitment to principles even when challenged. 2 beings from alternate realities had crossed dimensional barriers and, in less than 4 hours, reminded Starfleet of its founding ideals. Vision proved that consciousness was real when it made choices that mattered. John demonstrated that even the loneliest soul could find connection across the vastness of space and circumstance. They came from universes that shouldn't have touched, They brought abilities that defied Federation science. They faced dangers that threatened to tear reality apart. And they responded not with conquest or domination, but with sacrifice and service. In the end, that was the most profound crossover of all. Not between universes, but between the ideals of heroes across all realities. The conviction that life had value, that individuals mattered, that the strongest power wasn't in what you could destroy, but in what you chose to protect. Vision was gone, his atoms scattered across space, the Mind Stone destroyed beyond recovery. But Johns remained, a living bridge between realities, carrying forward the lesson both had taught. That home wasn't where you came from. It was what you chose to defend. And somewhere in the infinite diversity of the cosmos, among the countless realities that might exist beyond dimensional barriers, perhaps other heroes would one day make the same choice. To stand against darkness. To protect the innocent. To prove through action that consciousness, whether organic, synthetic, or something beyond classification, was defined by courage, compassion, and the willingness to sacrifice for something greater than yourself. The Federation would face new challenges. Reality would test them again. But they would face those trials with the knowledge that even strangers from impossible places could become family. That was the gift Vision and John had given them. And it would endure. Live long and prosper. Hit the subscribe button for more interesting stories. Thank you.